Live
Turning
na
out
talaga
to
to.
be ayun. Okay.
Okay.
Parang intra-family affair pala yun.
All right. Okay. How about the allegations coming from the different parties? Were you able to
The
verify
the
or
allegations, particularly the allegation, it all started with Grace Palicas, right? Grace Palicas is kind of like a disgruntled member of the family who is in competition with Nas Daily because she also is giving seminars and talks and all that stuff, and then she kind of feels like she feels left out that she wasn't included in the talks.
so
So yeah,
that's
medyo
ano?
sinasabotahe niya.
So you were able to establish that. That's ano.
That's what's happening. What the
That's what's
research
happening.
shows. That's what the research shows, that she was not in the loop, and
Okay.
she's attacking. She said she's attacking the translators who did not translate Dao properly. But what she forgets is it was her own cousin, Estelia Palangdao, who was actually the real translator and right hand woman of Wang Od. And
Oh.
as it turns out, parang it's like ganito kasi si Gracia pala is always in Metro Manila. So she's not staying in her village. So because she's not there all the time, lumalabas na yung family decided na when they needed to talk to Nas Daily, they would choose another person, not Gracia. And Gracia now feels left out. And so, yan, sinabotahe niya.
Mm.
It's an
When you
internal
say
thing, and then it exploded.
you say na sinasabotahe, is that like an assumption coming from you, or that's
Well,
ano coming from
it's what do you call this? It is an assumption based on a lot of indicators. So there's circumstantial evidence for it.
right? Okay. Okay, bye.
Okay,
Let's start.
let's do
Let's
this.
start. All right, here we go. All right, good evening ladies and gentlemen. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Welcome to Istoryang Futbolero. My name's Ron Poblete with my usual co-host, my partner in crime every Fridays, tinatawag nating Constipation Friday for obvious reasons, si Orion Perez Dumdum. Orion, good evening brother. Musta
Thank
bay?
you. I'm the chippy boy, also known as the chippy boy.
Yes, the chippy and the soft drinks is
And
ready,
Coke
and
boy.
ating well-renowned political scientist at very charming na professor from UP ay nandito ngayon, ang ating special guest. Let me introduce si Professor Clarita Carlos. Professor, good evening. Thank you for joining us. It's an honor.
Hi, good evening, Ron and Orion. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's a huge honor, ma'am. Huge honor talaga, Prof.
Huge honor.
Have you.
Salamat.
Medyo tumaas yung antas ng aming programa, Doctor, nang pumasok ka.
Totoo yun.
Ngayon, kapanipaniwala na kami ngayon kasi meron na kaming actual professor. Full professor, ha? Hindi yung mga nagpapanggap sa TV. Orion, ha? Yung best friend ni Orion kasi madalas parating kino-quote sa TV. Kaya ngayon meron talaga tayong actual.
Yung
full
naglalagay
professor.
ng article na walang laman.
Estudyante ko yun.
Oo, diba?
Estudyante niya yan. Estudyante dati ni Prof yun.
Professor, I take it you've been doing this for a long time. I can imagine we can't really distill everything in 1 hour and a half. The knowledge, the experience, the learnings that you were able to accumulate all through the decades. But as far as if people didn't know, no, si Dr. Clarita Carlos has been doing this since the early 90s, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Clarita, or even before that, after the EDSA revolution, you were actually you did some consultancy with the Senate. Is that correct? Is that accurate? I was reading up on your Wikipedia earlier.
Yeah.
So
I really don't know who put it there, but it's fairly accurate. Actually, as early as I can't remember now. If you're 75, so many things you don't remember. Siguro mga late 90s, mga 1988 or 1989, we formed a group with the Local Government Development Foundation.
there you go.
Bankrolled by the Konrad Adenauer Foundation to undertake political education all over the archipelago. So yung mga barkada ko dyan, si Nene Pimentel, si Pepe Abueva, no? So we would be going around Tagbilaran, Cebu, etc. We were not advocating anything. Ako usually curtain riser nila. And I would talk about parliamentary systems and basics ba, para ako nagtuturo ng intro political science course. And we would have varied audiences, mostly local executives. So we were doing that for a whole number of years. Ang tagal namin ginagawa yun eh. And it was in the margins really. I mean, we were the only ones interested, I think. It only went from the margins to the mainstream when Duterte became president, because that was one of his campaign promises.
Right.
And siguro yun ang pinakamaigsing kasaysayan.
Pero Professor, parang ang tagal ng panahon na lumipas na you've been really strongly advocating for constitutional reform, but it didn't happen until 2016 that talagang there was a serious movement from the government to actually proceed and do it. Although we've, Ryan and I have been talking about this during the time of GMA, meron talagang serious push sa Kongreso to actually push for constitutional reforms. But during Duterte's time, is this the first time, Professor Clarita, na may isang presidente na talagang explicitly says during the campaign period that he wants to change the Constitution as part of his mandate?
Well, there were many before Duterte. Of course, you remember Ramos. He wanted to extend his term and he used one little known section in the Constitution. Alam ni Orion to, yung initiative. No? Unfortunately, tinested sa Supreme Court, and because there was no IRR, as usual, wala yung mga nitty-gritty nun, so hindi siya nakapasa. And then I think there were many efforts by Gloria Arroyo during her 10 and a half year stint also to do reform, but they were just, they were just noises, really no, how would you call it, deliberate effort to make it happen. And then Duterte, by the way, I voted for him only because he wanted to do constitutional reform. I didn't know that person, Sabi ko na, itong tao na to, talagang busit na busit as local executive ng 21 years, talagang nire-reject yung centralized, dikta from Manila. So yun ang naging incentive niya. Pero unfortunately, yung style niya is such na, sige, gawin niyo to ha. Yung pagka hindi niya micromanager, yan ang naging infirmity nung desire niya, because eventually just fizzled out. Diba? Wala na.
I want to get into that. Actually, Prof, I wanted to get into that, but before we start asking you questions regarding the whole efforts of the Duterte administration to change the Constitution, before we get there, let's start with something that is, probably the usual contention that you hear from politicians and even people that support these politicians. Like, for example, I remember quite vividly, there was this, interview with the current mayor of the city of Manila, Yorme Isko Moreno. And ako kung napag-usapan na ba natin ito, Orion? Sabi kasi meron siyang quote dyan, tinanong siya ng isang reporter about federalism. Sabi niya, alam mo, okay lang naman sa akin na palitan yung sistema. Pero hindi ba ang problema natin yung mga tao na nagpapatakbo? Di ba yun ang dapat nating patakbuhin? Kaya ang question ko sa iyo, Professor Clare, to get the ball rolling, do systems matter if the people who run these systems are incompetent or corrupt? Paano ba natin, how do we sort of marry the idea behind it? And meron bang merit yung sinabi ni Isko Moreno regarding changing systems as opposed to changing people?
Okay, a small philosophical footnote. You want to change things. Either I change you, Ron, and Orion, and change your values, beliefs, orientation, attitudes, etc. Meaning change the person.
Okay.
Or I change the institutions within which you are made to operate. The empirical evidence suggests to us that it will take us 3 generations, equivalent to 90 years, bago ko mabago kayong dalawa. Matagal kasi magbago eh. Diba? But, if you want to short-circuit the process, baguhin ko yung environment mo. Parang alam mo yung leche flan, diba? Leche flan, diba dati-rati yung oblong yung corny na na mold mo. Gawin mo yung mold, gawin mo siyang star. O kaya, I don't know, another kind of, yung mold will represent the institution. Susundin mo yung mold na yon as an individual. That is the quickest route to social change. That is the reason why Orion and I are really pounding on the heads of people that institutions matter. Total, by the way, I'm as old as the Republic, no? Yung isang pa ako andyan na sa libingan, yung Republic natin ay teenager pa rin, hindi niya malaman kung sino siya. Nagpapatewakal siya minsan, no? So, but yes, you want some change? I mean, I'm sure nagbabasa kayo sa media, talagang buang na yung mga tao sa things which are happening. Yun, yung hyper-corruption, mga magbobo, magnanakaw, incompetent. For God's sake, dapat, ito lang ba yung mga tao? Wala na bang mga matatalino at hindi magnanakaw?
Parang recurring yung issue Parang the problem is coming back all the time. So it means that it's a systemic problem. It shows that it's a problem with the environment. Now, if you change that environment, you change the incentive scheme such that you're rewarding certain things that before were not rewarded, and then you penalize certain things that used to be implicitly rewarded, which cause people to act in a way that is undesirable, but you penalize that instead, and then you emphasize that there are more rewards in this direction, mababago natin yung takbo ng buhay ng mga tao. People will start to gravitate towards where the rewards are, where the incentives are, and stay away from kung nasaan yung mga punishment. So I think that's the way to go. It's really changing the system based on rewards and punishments or incentive schemes, basically.
Professor Clare,
And, let me just quickly follow that through para bago ko malimutan. Tama si Orion, human nature being as it is, we want to do something that is pleasurable, not painful. That's the reason why, di ba, majority rule is based on numbers. Bakit puro numero na lang? It's because, fundamentally, no one will vote to harm himself. Tama ba? Therefore, if you present incentives and at the same time pains, meaning sanctions, tapos i-balance off mo ito, makikita mo, at magiging painful to really magnakaw, maging bobo, etc., then people will be less likely to follow that trajectory. Pupuntahan niya yung pleasurable, di ba? Human nature being as it is. That's the reason why I am glad Sara Duterte, Moreno, etc., young people are gunning for the top positions because they're young. They're more likely to change their minds. They're not bigots, no? Because if they don't change their minds, tama si Orion, we will have more of the same things. Binagon lang natin pagmumukha ng politika natin.
But based on your experience,
I was going to say, to support the idea of the system change and all that. Ang Singapore kasi dati used to be very medyo chaotic siya dati, very chaotic and marumi.
I heard.
Ang mga tao dito dati napaka uneducated, marumi, laging dumudura dito, dura doon, ihi dito, ihi doon, pati sa elevator, iihi. Ganun. That's true. And dati talaga, ang dami pang gangsters, ang dami talagang mga nanggugulo talaga.
And the main force behind peace and order, the police, were easily corruptible daw. Yun dyan sa
yes, ganun din dati. Yes. There's typical third world country sila dati. But because Lee Kuan Yew and his team, they understood the power of changing the incentive scheme. So, ang dami nilang, kumbaga talagang they have this active drive to reward certain things that are good and then penalize things that are bad. Ano talaga, to a micromanaged level talaga, ha, such that in a short span of time, yung mga taong mahilig umihi lang kahit saan, ngayon naging sobrang law-abiding na. Yung mga dating dura talaga ng dura sila dati. It's terrible. Even my dad actually saw back in the 80s na meron pa ring remnants noon. And like 1960s na yun yung naging independent time na ni Lee Kuan Yew yun. But even as late as the 80s, meron pa ring nagdudura-dura. Pero konti na lang sila. And then by the time I first came to Singapore in the 90s, nakabisita lang muna. Wala na yun. Wala nang taong nagdudura-dura. Kung meron man, siguro foreigner na Pilipino sigurong bagong salta. But yung mga Singaporean, hindi na gumagawa nun. So that change.
Alam mo, Orion, you don't have to go far as Singapore to prove that point. No? Yung sinasabi nga ni Dr. Clare, the empirical evidence, you can find that here in the Philippines, sa Davao City. Dati sa Davao, medyo chaotic rin sa Davao nung panahon namin, nung lumalaki kami. At napakahirap maglakad sa kalsa. Killing fields, tsaka madaling ma-hold up. At mga tao walang disiplina. Tsaka mga Davao, reklamador. At tsaka una-una sila, sila yung kumbaga pasaway. Pero nung naging mayor si Presidente Duterte sa Davao, talagang yung pagbabago. Sabi nga ni Professor Clare, if you want to speed up the transition, there has to be a system in place, and I think what Mayor Duterte was able to do in Davao City, it goes to prove yung idea behind it. Now you can change the system given the powers of a mayor, and if we can only change the system talaga profoundly, like changing the constitution, I'm sure the changes that will happen, that will ensue, are going to be much more profound. So, Dr. Clare, apart from the evidence that have been presented, and you know for a fact, why do another question here is kasi you have contemporaries, you have other professors or political scientists that don't support the idea of changing the constitution. They feel meron nga iba dyan, mga former justices pa, doctor, na sinasabi nila the 87 Constitution, they go as far as saying that it's a perfect constitution. The problem is the people behind it and how the government officials or the politicians are circumventing what's in place. What can you say about that, Dr. Clare?
Well, usually I want to keep quiet, otherwise I'll bullshit everybody. Nakakasawa na sila eh. No? Kasi, Diyos mio, ilan ang ginastos ko para pantaksi dyan sa mga committee hearings na yan, nagsawa na ako dyan. But, wala namang nangyayari yan. Tanungin mo kay Orion kung ilang beses na ako nag-present. Nagpe-present ka pa lang, nagte-text, nagte-telepono, o kaya pinapadala yung chief of staff niya. Saan pa naman? Yan tinamaan ng party list na yan. Kami ni Michael Mastura, ilang beses kami nag-appear sa Senate. Ang sinasabi namin, mali, yung ginagawa yung party list. Di ngayon, di hina-harvest nila yung katangahan nila. Iba-iba talaga yung how many years have I taught European politics, where party list is really a fundamental framework in the electoral system? 55 years na, because I started teaching noon at the age of 20 o 75 na ako, hindi ba 55 na yun? Usmar Joseph, lumalangoy na ako dyan sa European politics. So, well, of course, if you're 75, siguro magiging ganyan din kayo, no? Medyo mas mataas na nga, mas matanda lang ako sa inyo, kanya mas marami ako siyempre nabasa. Pero yes, the empirical evidence is so strong, is so palpable. Why are we closing our eyes to that? That's why, let's not name names. Talagang one time nagtawag ito si Pangilinan ng hearing. Saan ka naman parang 50 kami doon, no? Tapos pinaumpisahan pa niya dun sa kanyang guru na isang justice din. Talagang yamot na yamot ako. Gusto ko magsisigaw talaga, but I was given only 3 minutes. Ano ba masasabi sabi mo sa 3 minuto, for God's sake. Diba?
Ang hirap pa talaga sa mga hearing, Dr. Clare. Parang no different from interview sa TV, no? Parang it's not so limited to sabi nga, I was watching one of the interviews of Joe Rogan. If you're familiar with him, it's a popular blogger on social media. He was interviewing this Snowden character who used to work for the NSA. Ang sabi niya, ang problema daw sa interviews when you do interviews with the mainstream media, you're given a few minutes to discuss a complex matter, and that cannot be. Lalong-lalo na with something as huge, as important as structural reforms or systemic problems that we are encountering here in our country. So I can imagine your frustration, Prof. 3 minutes to talk about the merits of changing the Constitution. I think that's not enough time for them to understand. And given the proclivity of our yung ating mga mambabatas, yung ating mga senador na pag may hearing, parang done this, done that, magbabasa ng kanilang cellphone, check ng kanilang mga text, hindi naman nakikinig, at paulit-ulit yung mga tanong, hindi nila ina-absorb yung anong pinapag-usapan. And everything sometimes is for show.
Yung pin-repair ni Orion na ang gagandang mga talagang empirical evidence, siguro within 5 minutes, kung talagang if they're paying attention, they should pay attention to the numbers. And the numbers are very powerful, no? Kitang-kita mo eh. You're not, hindi ka nga magdi-discuss about philosophical things. So say, ito federal system, ito parliamentary system. Tignan mo yung pagkakaiba. Saan natin makikita yung source, nung causality, kung saan nanggagaling yung pagkakaiba? And pag tinrace mo yan, meron sa social sciences yung tawag process tracing. Sundan mo yung narratives. Makikita mo dahil sa sistema ng parliamentary system at dahil federal siya. I mean, how much clearer do they want it to be? But yeah, as you said, no? Hindi na nga sila nagbabasa, hindi pa sila nakikinig. Talagang wow.
And yet, you always mention that word, Dr. Clare, yung causality. Wala daw causality, puro lang daw anong word na ginagamit nila, Orion?
Daw sila correlation, not causation. Actually, nakakatawa nga yan kasi that's a typical tactic ng mga pa-debater type. They'll say, just because there is correlation does not mean there is causality. That's true to a certain extent, but correlation is the first step to finding out whether there is causality. So meaning to say, when there is causation or when there is correlation, then you can further investigate what the direction of the causality is. You can find out if A causes B or B causes A, or if A and B are actually both caused by another external factor C. So that kind of thing. It's if you do the proper scientific analysis, you will find out which one makes more sense. Is A causing B or B causing A, or both of them caused by something else? Ganon, you'll find that out when you do a 360-degree analysis from all sides of you look at all points of view, and you'll see this one makes more sense than other one. So ganon, makikita mo talaga. You will find out eventually where the causation is, where the causality is.
Dr. Clare, one thing I notice about the proponents of people who are against constitutional reform, they seem to be very in love, and it borders irrationality nga yung kanilang attachment to that constitution. So I have a question for you. Do you think, kasi one thing, they even called that 1987 constitution as the freedom constitution, di ba? So there's sentimentality involved when it comes to that constitution, and it's not even...
Actually, Ron, you needed to correct, no? The Freedom Constitution pala is actually a different constitution from the 1987 Constitution. The Freedom Constitution was actually the interim constitution that was set up by Cody
before the 1987 Constitution.
Yes. When she took power and then she abolished the 1973, she set up the Freedom Constitution as the parang interim. And then the 1987 Constitution is the Cory Constitution. That's what. Right,
but the sentimentality behind the 1987 Constitution has not diminished from that Freedom Constitution, kumbaga, because people were still high on their gains, no, after the 1986 revolution, the EDSA revolution. So my question to you, Dr. Clare, do you think freedom as a political construct uh, undermines the ability of the state to set forth proper controls that addresses basic human frailties and weaknesses. Because it's apparent, no, that the person like Presidente Duterte, he's addressing this in that level, yung human frailty of a Filipino on how we sort of respond to certain controls that the government imposes. Because of freedom, too much freedom, as a matter of fact, since the 1987 Constitution or 1986 EDSA Revolution, sabi nga nila, Doc, kung ano yung corruption na nangyari sa panahon ni Marcos, parang nag-transition, pumalit lang yung ibang cast of characters lang yung take over at sila naman yung nakinabang. And ngayon, mas marami pa silang freedom kasi wala nang pakialamang state to really maging check and balance sa mga problema na to, lalong-lalo na yung problema natin sa mga oligarchs controlling the affairs of the state. Dr. Clare, is there such a phenomenon happening after the revolution, the 1986 revolution?
Yes. Well, siguro it cannot be long-winded because we have limited time.
Yes.
But again, a little philosophical footnote.
Okay.
Why do you have government? You have government because you have a notional state of nature where there was no government. And therefore, you have two kinds of notions. These are just notions because we don't know whether they are in fact grounded, based on evidence, because we don't have the evidence. We just reverse engineer and we say, when did the government come about? Why did it come about? So you have two philosophers there, John Locke and Thomas Hobbes.
Thomas Hobbes.
Thomas Hobbes is saying, you have government because people are full of passion. They're going to kill each other, dog eat dog. And therefore, you have to establish what we know as the Leviathan. The Leviathan is really the dictator. Authoritarian governments will worship in the altar of Thomas Hobbes. John Locke, who is the father of American Constitution, from which we copied our own Constitution, is saying no, man is basically rational. And therefore, his notion of whatever, whenever he creates government, because man is the one who created government. He only created government to govern property rights. Very, very clear kay John Locke. If you read John Locke, to protect property rights. And therefore, John Locke is the father of liberal democracy. Now, you see the increasing tension which you, Ron, excellently described. There is a tension between the power of the state and individual rights. And it's an active tension. It's not anything, That's why I don't like people to think in boxes. I want them to think always in terms of a continuum. Naglalakad siya sa continuum. So there are times the state will say, mandatory vaccination pag hindi ka nagbakuna, huwag ka nang lalabas kasi manghahawa-hawa ka. And of course, the individual say, di pwede kasi yung freedom ko, freedom of choice, freedom what I need to do with my body, like that. So yung tension na yun, sasabihin ng state, I am going now to invoke the power of the state because I know the summum bonum. I know the highest good. And the highest good is declared by numbers. Di ba? Majority rule. Kay John Locke din yung majority rule, by the way, that you vote because you don't want to deliberately harm yourself. Yun ang basic philosophy niya. And therefore, when we find that government is invoking its power to control human behavior, facial recognition, social control, etc., we assume, theoretically, philosophically, that is for the summum bonum, for the common good. Of course, you can always shoot down the common good and you'll say, well, yan ba yung notion mo ng common good? Darang mali yan. Kasi gusto ko, hindi ako magpapakuna. So, contest, di ba? Nagko-collide dyan. And we err. We make a mistake if we think in boxes because it's always very difficult to defend boxes kasi may rigidity in boxes. That's why, as social scientist, I always tell my student, mag-isip kayo sa continuum kasi yung continuum parang duyan it's moving here and there. Parang there is no ideal unitary system. There is no federal system. Nagmo-move siya. Tignan mo yung federal US, pinakialaman ng education. Diyos Mariosep, jurisdiction yun ng 50 states of the United States of America. Pero sabi ni sino ba yung pangalawang Bush Orion, sabi niya, sige mga bobobo na mga anak niyo yung mga bata diyan hindi nakakabasa, grade 12 na. Etong pera, federal money. Gawa kayo ng charter schools. Yung charter schools, federal money yan eh. Pero nakita mo, sumausaw siya sa education eh. Hindi niya dapat sausawan yon because hindi rigid yung, hindi naka-box, naka-continuum. Di ba pati yung security eh? Ba't napakialaman yung security eh? State right yun. This is the kind of federal system that Orion and I really are ambitioning for our country. Hindi yung pinost-poste mo. Naglalakad siya in a continuum. Minsan cooperative siya, minsan talaga draconian. The state will really have to invoke its right. Because the state's right is the highest right. Because the individual will not continue to exist if the state disappears.
Right.
I'm sorry, the philosophical groundings, but it's very important for our explanations about our political life to have the philosophical grounding.
That explanation, Dr. Clare, actually provided me some clarity on how to explain to others who seem to be very adversarial against this president. Kasi the president, he talaga espouses the first priority really is peace and order. And it requires a little bit of, political will and a little bit of enforcement ang ginagawa niya. So that's why my follow-up question to that, Dr. Clare.
Wait lang, Ron.
Sige.
Kung pwede, pasok lang ako dito. So actually, back in the first year of Duterte's administration, I actually wrote a note, a Facebook note that parang basically it's like a web page, right? And then I explained the philosophical groundings of the Duterte administration. And I explained there as well the same thing that Prof. Clare was talking about yung kay John Locke. Sorry, not John Locke, Thomas Hobbes. But from the point of view of the eastern side, kasi sa China, well, of course, China was where many of the eastern thought came from. Meron din silang ganon, yung parang dichotomy between one group that believes that the general direction of man is towards medyo evil and chaos, basically chaos, gulo. So kinakailangan i-control yan. And the other one is all men are considered parang the general tendency of man is towards good. Yun yung So yung one point of view is the Confucian point of view, which is all men are good. Yun yung the general idea is that just let people do whatever they do, they will be good, they will generally be good. But the point of view of the legalist tradition, it's exactly the same as Thomas Hobbes, that it kumbaga left to their own devices, eventually things will break down and people will start killing each other or fighting, magkakaroon ng chaos. So kinakailangan i-control. And then I said, this is actually where President Duterte is coming from, and it makes sense. You actually have to strike a balance. Hindi naman pwedeng laging ganito. You're somewhere in the middle, depending on what are the circumstances. So during the time when Davao was killing fields, di ba? Kinakailangan talaga ng Leviathan. Kinakailangan talaga nung yung legalism ng mga Chinese ang sinasabi. Where yung talagang strong hand. Tapos kapag yung mga tao nag-change na naging mas mababait, pwede ka nang medyo mag-ano ng konti. And even in Singapore, they've done that as well. Na parang sobrang stricto dati. Ngayon dito sa Singapore, I generally feel very, very free. No? Of course, right now, may mga medyo lockdown type restrictions because of COVID. But, normal times, pag walang COVID, it's very, I feel freer here than in the Philippines because I'm not looking around na baka may mag-hold up sa akin, di ba? Wala akong ganong takot eh. Okay. So, ganon, merong ganong dichotomy rin. And so that's what I explained na ito yung thought process nung kay Duterte na parang talaga nandun medyo sa Leviathan and the Thomas Hobbes point of view or the Han Fate's point of view from the Chinese perspective. Because medyo at this point in time may pagkamagulo ang Pilipinas, so kailangan Diba?
Ako, all right. I have no doubts about why you're under yung inclination to actually support this president because you understand where he's coming from. But I'm also curious about what Dr. Clare thinks because the whole time I was telling Dr. Clare that she seems to be marching to her own beat when it comes to this president. She says things that her peers normally would have a different stand. Kasi their liberal leanings are very apparent. And that's why I wanted to ask Dr. Clare, what do you understand about this current president that some of your peers don't? And why do they seem to overlook certain stark realities as to why he became so successful in maintaining confidence and trust levels up to now? Dr. Clare.
Well, for one, Ron, I'm my own person and I don't allow anybody to complete my sentences. Okay? I've earned my spars, took me how many years? 40 years to get to full Professor 12. And I didn't do anything. I didn't reach that point by sleeping around with anybody. Okay? So, kaya, people have different views, yeah. Let them defend their views. If they cannot defend them, nagkaka-cute lang sila, they should shut up. Yan palagi ko eh. Ikaw, challenge mo ako sa klase, nagpapakute ka, please get out already. Diba? I'm a scientist. I rely on empirical evidence. Tama ang sinabi ni Orion. Isipin nyo, anong bansa ang nakagawa ng agrarian reform, nanguha ng lupa sa landlord without the power of the state? Wala. Kailangan mo talaga ng puwersa ng Estado para makuha mo yung lupa kasi walang magbibigay ng lupa.
Exactly.
Sino ba nagsabi, Orion, na ipo-forgive mo yung nagpatay ng tatay mo, yung nagkuha ng lupa mo, hindi mo ipo-forgive? Diba? Kasi yung lupa, nakadikit yung mo doon eh. So, yes, that's why this is again a minority opinion. Thank you, Ron, for that observation. That in fact, countries need to go through an authoritarian period, a benevolent dictator, for social change to happen. And after they have established those institutions, it becomes the daily an aspect of the daily part of life, the kinds of things that we do every day, no? Parang SOP na natin. That's the time yung sinabi ni Orion, talagang siya, very observant siya sa Singapore. Mag-lessen ka na nung restriction. Unti-untiin mong tanggalin yung mga tanikala na nilagay mo nung una. Kasi yung una talaga kailangan mong talagang parang ipreso sila eh. Yung diyan kayo sa preso ha. Pag hindi kayo nag-arte ng ganito, alam nyo na yung mga sanctions mechanisms. When I was at the National Defense, bakit hindi ako nagnakaw ron? Alam ko na magnakaw after 1 year. Kailangan 7 kaming magnakaw, di pwedeng mag-isa ako kasi ako'y tagagawa ng cheque. Ba't hindi ako nagnakaw? Sabi nila, ma'am, alam mo yung training natin na 4 million, inyo ho yan. Sabi ko, ha? Bakit? Kasi ma'am, meron na tayong listahan ng nag-attend kung saan hotel.
Oh my gosh.
Nila yun.
Oh my gosh.
Naman hindi ako nagnakaw. Laki-laki ata ng 4 million. Ang daming zero nun. Unang-una, taga-UP kasi sabi ko, mga taga-UP dapat hindi, pakita ko hindi magnanakaw. Pangalawa, siyempre full Professor 12 na ako. Ano pa naman gagawin ko magnanakaw akong ganyan? Pangatlo, siyempre natakot akong mapreso. Siguro yung pangatlo yung, di ba? Sanctions work. No? Sometimes, when I look back, sabi ko, nga pala, dapat pala nagnakaw na ako doon. Wala namang napepreso pala at nagawa ko yung bahay ko na 20 taon lang ginagawa. Parang ganun ba? But yes, sanctions matter. And of course, your personal philosophy as a person, it also yung integrity mo as a person. No? I always say, I'm a stupid person. It's really a metaphor for dapat maraming stupido na tulad ko na natatakot magnakaw. Diba?
So, Doc, Prof, anong hindi nakikita ng mga peers mo nga na ayaw kay Presidente Duterte? Na napansin ninyo? Why are they so adamant that this is not the right president for us? We should remove him. Sometimes they go to that extent, no? That they espouse that type of action.
Ang UP kasi, is very big on violation of human rights. Okay. And in many of my interviews, I've continued to raise the issue of extrajudicial killings. Alam mo ba, I was going to be awarded Orion ng outstanding UP alumnus That was the time yung Kian de los Santos ba yun was happening. Andiyan na, naka-ready na yung saya ko. Yung aking RA, my research assistant was already in my gate. Alam mo ba, iyak ako ng iyak dahil nung nadinig ko yung sinasabi niyang papatayin na siya, sabi niya may exam siya the following day. Talaga, I mean, I didn't even know this child. No, but because I was an educator, talagang masyado, hindi ako nag-attend nung hindi ako maka-attend kasi I was so devastated by that story. And I continue to be devastated by stories of extrajudicial killing. I think that is one thing that really turned off my colleagues who also once upon a time supported this president. No?
Okay.
Minosin na natin yung kanyang masamang mga salita. Hindi na yan magbabago. Ka-age ko yung presidente. Alam mo, hindi na kami magbabago. Pero nalimutan niya na presidente siya ng republika at hindi lang siya nagtitinda ng maruya sa tabi-tabi. That's the reason why, ang dami nga niyang nilose na opportunities. He had a super majority in the Congress. For God's sake, if he had only strategized, diba Orion, super talagang nanghinayang tayo doon. He could have pushed a new constitution if he wanted to.
I think so too. I really think so too. I just, and maybe Ron, you're probably asking, why is it that Prof Clare's mga colleagues are ganito, tapos si Prof Clare ganito? I'm thinking, yung sa ibang mga colleagues ni Prof Clare in the academe, a lot of them are a bit more, I wouldn't say ideological, but a little more rigid in terms of their worldview, na parang, or their, yung parang guiding philosophy or ideology. Whereas Prof Clare, I think, is much more parang objective, na parang, case-to-case basis lagi tayo, pragmatic. And that's kind of how I am as well, coming from a very like scientific engineering type of point of view. So I think that's how it is.
Yeah, ideology is dead. There is no socialist way of repairing a road or a democratic way. You just repair a road. Diba? Why are we closing our eyes to the fact that China lifted 850 million out of extreme poverty? Bakit? Porque anti-China ka? Binubura mo yan? No. Diba?
Tama.
Mali mali. You're a scientist and a scientist is not carrying a flag. Walang political color ang scientist. Kaya pag Ryan, minsan talagang nayaya mo to kasi naman, si Carlos ay pro-Duterte. Minsan naman, ina-accuse naman akong anti-Duterte. Sabi ko, putris kayo.
I get the same, Prof. I get the same. I get the same. Yan, DDS yan si Orion. Tapos bigla na lang yung ibang mga DDS sasabi, naging anti-Duterte na siya. Parang, look, hindi ba ako pwede pa minsan mag-criticize? Like, for example, when I criticize the way the 2018 CONCOM was formed, sabi ko, it's full of lawyers. Where are the economists? Where are the political scientists? Ba't konti lang? Parang, it's too many lawyers. And many of them are lawyers who don't know anything about political systems and economics. So sabi ko, nako.
Or even administration.
Or administration, yeah. The training is different
Orion, para niyang gumagawa ng curriculum na akala nila 1,000 units is better than 100 units.
Ay, nako, ay.
Oo nga, Dr. Clare, no?
Nako.
Gusto ko kayo mag-follow up dyan. I wanted to ask you about the CONCOM proposed draft, why it failed for that matter. And I think we had this discussion before, Orion, that like you said, there are not enough people who are credible enough to make sure that it's a balanced draft or a balanced proposal. That's why it failed. And the president saw that right away when he was given the proposal. He wouldn't have asked the DILG to come up with its own diba? A version of the draft or two. Kung sa tingin niya okay yung draft na yun, pero it would appear, Dr. Clare, no, na medyo they were doing it out of legacy than actual practicality or anything based on science or data. Kasi unang-una yung
Ron, it's the same thing what they're doing right now. Bakit nila tinagpas-tagpas yung kanilang amendment? Isusulong muna daw nila yung economic Aba, ang saya ninyo. You're looking at the Constitution as an organism. Ang buong katawan niya is infirm, may sakit. Papakailaman niya yung lapay. Yung economic nakatukod dyan sa political, sa social, sa cultural, harangin niya ng political. No? Naku, katakot-takot na
if I may add, if I may add, no, just to add to what Prof. Clare was saying, parang kung sa kotse yon, tatlong aspekto ng kotse ang sira. Yung manibela, ang engine at yung suspension ng kotse. So lahat 'yan may problema. Ang sinasabi ngayon, ayusin lang natin yung engine lang. Aanhin mo ang pag-aayos lang ng engine, yung pag-steering mo hindi naman din gumagana ng tama. Kung gusto mo pumunta ng left, hindi kumakabig So, medyo pangit yung steering mechanism mo. So you're not able to maneuver properly. So kahit naayos nga yung tawag nito, yung engine mo, yung makina mo, pero hindi ka naman nakaka-steer ng properly, problema rin. Tapos yung suspension system mo sira rin. So parang kailangan ayusin lahat ng mali. You've got these three parts of the car that are not working well, and they all work together, by the way. So if you only fix one but not the other two, parang kulang talaga. You'll get into an accident kasi bibilis ka kasi may makina ka na, pero hindi ka naman nakakapag-steer, hindi ka nakakaliko ng tama, mababangga ka talaga.
Yeah, excellent metaphor. That's the reason why siguro iniisip ko, siguro Orion, I change natin yung yung strategy to sell constitutional reforms to those who will make it happen as a constituent assembly or even as a con-con. To sell it in terms of their personal interests. We can tell them that if you have a parliamentary system, term limits will not be relevant. You can be like 100 years old and you can continue to be an MP for as long as your constituency will elect you. There will be no case of political dynasty, ngayon magkapareho tayo ng apelyido, asawa, anak, in-law. Never mind that you continue to be elected by, these are irrelevant things. I think that's one way to sell it because always personal interest will be paramount. So, kasi palagi hindi mo na-notice mo, napasok agad yung term limits tapos political dynasty na, but yes, sabi ko, the only way to do that is immediately i-demolish ko. Sasabihin ko, these are irrelevant. And then I go on to discuss what a parliamentary system looks like as party government and how it will discipline and compel our political parties to have a distinct program of government. Nakita mo ngayon, sungkit kay Robredo, kay kay ganito. Hindi nag-uusap sa programa ng gobyerno. Ano ba yan?
Alam mo, Dr. Clare, ito talaga napansin ko sa mga nangyayari sa mga current developments sa political realm ay yung opposition dahil sa kanilang desperation nga to get somebody to sort of like have the pull like as big as the president. They're looking for personalities to be part of their efforts. And the ones who seem to have been ang tawag nito medyo na nawala sa good graces ni presidente. Yun ang mga recruit nila gaya ni Manny Pacquiao, ni Isko Moreno dahil feeling nila itong mga tao na to can deliver the votes. But as far as political ideology is concerned, yung talagang distinct push for certain principles on for a party, wala silang ganun, Dr. Clare. Medyo may kulang, medyo may immaturity yata yung ating mga politicians as far as that's concerned. So the question is, Dr. Clare, how can you convince a person if you're gonna go for their self-interest, and you're gonna sell this based on self-interest? How will you sell to a politician that this is gonna be good for them? Kasi the first thing that they will ask themselves is, if we change it to a parliamentary system, am I capable enough to actually thrive in that system? Because it's an unknown. Anong comment niyo dyan, Dr. Clare?
Well, simplify it. Mag-drawing ka. Kung may board ako dito sa likod, ito drawing ko yan. Hindi ako magsulat eh.
Sayang.
Sa itaas, nandun yung, i-visualize nyo na lang. Sa itaas, nandun yung elected, yung governors nyo. Sa ibaba tayo, the governed. Sa gitna, nandyan ang political party. If the political party is broken, walang mag-aggregate ng interest mo. Alam nga naman, lahat na magsasalita ka na lang. That's the reason why you have the political party who will aggregate your interest. Boris Johnson told the British public, ako, if the Conservative wins, I'll get Britain out of the EU. But it's not Boris Johnson's promise as such. Mag-isa lang siya eh. He has the Conservative Party behind him. His Conservative Party controlled the House of Commons. They got Great Britain out of the EU. Now, no one person can promise anything. Laway lang yan. No? Kailangan meron siyang political party behind him. That's the reason why I'm asking for a program of government. Gusto ko yan si Lacson, si Soto, etc. Maglahad ho kayo. Dalawang bagay lang. Wag nang dumapa sa iba pa. Tungkol sa kalusugan, tungkol sa edukasyon. Dahil dudugtong-dugtong na yan eh. Anong gagawin nyo tungkol sa ating grabing problema sa health, given the pandemic and more pandemics? Anong gagawin nyo sa edukasyon na tayo pinakakule-kulelat sa sa lahat ng listahan? Okay? Yan dalawa na lang hingin mo sa kanila. And they have to have a political party behind them who will realize this. 300 of them in the lower chamber, 24 of them in the Senate. Ang presidente naman, huli na lang siya magsusulat, di ba? Yung magsasign-sign para maging the bill to become a statute. But yes, anyone who promises must have the political party behind him or her to make it happen. That's the reason why a parliamentary system is important. Now, wala namang mangyayari between now and then dahil we're still governed by the structures of the 87 Constitution. So, we are only hoping that Sara Duterte, Isko Moreno, young people, Bongbong Marcos, whoever, young, maybe more likely to have an open mind. Some of them have asked me to brief them on defense and security, which are my areas of expertise. Siyempre, isisingit ko na dyan yung constitutional reform. By the way. Diba? Kung gusto nyong magbago, yung tono ng ating politika. Pwede ho ba? Can we think about this? And in fairly simple terms, gagawa ako ng simpleng drawing. Papakita ko sa kanila exactly what we're talking about right now, Ron, Orion. What changing political structures would mean in terms of political outcomes. Simple lang, huwag yung masyadong convoluted, no? And if I can convince them, manalo sila, di masaya, di ba?
Do we have natanong ko, Dr. Clare, kasi based on your experience, matagal na rin kayo sa government, and you've been doing this for a long time, like I said kanina. Based on the cast of characters that we have right now in government, do you think we have enough brain power to make a successful transition from a unitary system to a parliamentary/federal form of government?
Sure. Alam mo, Ron, tayo ay napaka-wealthy na bansa. Ano nga ba wealthy sa Tagalog? Mayaman na bansa.
Mayaman.
Number 5 tayo sa most mineralized countries in the world. At yung minerals natin, hindi lang yung mga kung ano-ano lang dyan, ng mga tanso, no?
Gold,
We have the minerals, metals, na kailangan ng e-vehicles ngayon. You know, chromite, At alam nyo ba, ang Japan, in 4 years time, ayaw na niya yung diesel tsaka gasolina. Gusto na niya lahat mga battery-powered hydrogen, etc. If we are smart people, intelligent smart people, we will harness our natural resources. We will harness the cadre of professionals like you and me, scientists, engineers, architects, IT people like Orion. Put those two together, no? We're really stupid people. We're such a wealthy country, natural resources. Magtapong ka ng buto dyan, tutubo mag-isa niya. Gawin mo nga yan sa disyerto, Ron. Tignan mo nga kung tutubo. Siyempre, hindi siya tutubo. Hindi niyo ba napansin? Napaka-spoiled natin. No? Ang dami-dami nating kayamanan. Kaya nga, I'm really banking on, I want this change to happen na buhay pa ako, kung hindi na ako buhay sa aking mga apo at aking, because I have a great-grandchild already, no? I want a better Philippines for them. Ayaw ko nag-i-struggle sila the way I struggled na dumudugo pati tenga ko just to get to what I want to get, no? Ayoko nang ganun. Gusto ko, meron silang merit, yan, pwede silang makapasok. They will earn a right, an adequate salary, na hindi sila palaging nangungutang, palaging natatakot magkasakit, no? All these things, they can be done. institutional changes are very, very powerful. And I hope when we come up with another constitution to replace this very informed one, it will be a short constitution. Super daldal nitong constitution to. Ryan, alam mo ba kung di ako
Ang daming ang daming micromanagement. Grabe.
Hindi
Dr.
ko
Clare.
babasahin yan.
Dr. Clare, bakit masyadong mahaba itong konstitusyon na to? Anong napansin ninyo sa pagka-frame ng constitution, yung 1987 constitution? Bakit mahaba?
Kasi ang tono niya anti-Marcos. So ang ginawa niya, parang butas-butas-butas siguro ang sinabi niya. No? Lahat ng butas na makita niya, tinapalan niya. And when you do that, bumaba ka na sa nitty-gritty. Ang Constitution, basic framework lang yan. Dapat nga 2-3 pahina lang yan. Ilalagay mo lang yan in broad strokes. Pati yung federal system, huwag ka nang magsabing maraming chismis dyan. Sabihin mo lang kung ano yung basic framework ng federal system, elemental system.
Exactly.
Bahala na yung dynamics ang mangingialam dyan. At huwag ka maglalagay ng numero sa Constitution kasi for sure, magiging laos agad
Magbabago.
yung diba? Magbabago
Naku.
Dapat maiksi lang siya. Diba? Nakita niyo ba yung Constitution ng Amerika? Parang ilang piraso lang yun. And yet,
So broad strokes lang talaga, Dr. Clare.
yes, broad stroke lang.
Dapat.
Oo.
Actually, one of the problems nga, I was going to say, I mean, I recall how a lot of people make the mistake of saying that you don't need to change the constitution to have federalism or have decentralization. You can just amend only the local government code. They say that, and then I bring up to them the fact that I say sorry, but that's not true, because if you look at Article 10, Section 12, you're going to see something there that says that if you are a city or a town in a province and you become rich enough, you become very rich, that city suddenly becomes no longer part of the province. So basically, that particular clause, Article 10, Section 12, is the reason why we have people who are saying, bakit lahat ng mga probinsya ay mahihirap, hindi sila kayang mabuhay ng sarili? Bakit laging ganun? Alam nga naman hindi mangyayari yan kasi kapag may isang bayan na yumaman, bigla na lang siyang tinatanggal, nagiging independent city siya, hindi na nagiging part ng province, nagiging automatically part na siya ng parang to the national government na siya diretsyon nagre-report at nagbibigay ng kanyang budget, so ng kanyang tax revenue. Wala na siyang nasa-share sa province na kung saan siya galing. That's why provinces are generally poor. And so I said, and this is something that as an IT person, nakita ko kasi parang troubleshooting nangyayari. Sabi ko, bakit lahat nga may nagsabi kasi dati, lahat ng mga probinsya may hirap. All of them are reliant on the IRA, Internal Revenue Allocation. Kaya pala kasi nandito sa konstitusyon natin sinasabi na magiging independent siya kapag siya ay mayaman. So, pati yan, kailangan yan baguhin. Kailangan tanggalin yan. Because that part is essentially telling all these, basically making sure that the provinces stay poor. Because the moment they make one of their cities become rich, it no longer becomes under them.
Yeah.
Yun yung nangyayari.
It's a huge democratic deficit, and there are many, many others which we can identify. No?
Talking
I
about
remember-
democratic deficits, ladies
it's
and
a huge
gentlemen,
democratic deficit,
ladies and gentlemen, ang una kong how I learned about Prof Clare was from her book, and the democratic deficits in the Philippines, what is to be done. So she wrote that book together with her protege Dennis Lalata, and several of her staff members also had their names there, and your daughter was also part of it, diba? Si Portia, I think, was also there in the team as well. And then, so basically,
she said for another one who disappeared.
and essentially, I read that book many years ago. No, I read that book in book form. I actually have it back in my parents' house in Manila, in Pasig, and I got a copy of that from the recently departed Dr. Peter Kuppinger. Si Peter Kuppinger ang kasi I met him back in 2010, And so I was able to speak with him. So sa Konrad Adenauer Stiftung siya. And he gave me a copy of that book. And then he also told me, oh, by the way, you can also share that book for free. It's on this website. So I've been sharing that book, PDF file. Ano, talagang ever since 2010, I've been
Thank you.
spreading it out to so many people, and it's free. It's free. It's a PDF file. Nandyan yung buong libro. I have a real copy, and I'm going, when I come back, kung walang restrictions, magpapasign ako sa inyo, Prof. Clare. So yun, pero everyone can read it. Everyone can read it. Nandun sa CAS website, sa Konrad Adenauer Stiftung website. So
Dr. Clare, available pa ba yung libro na yan? Baka
wala na, ilang piraso. Kasi usually ang Conrad, they pay me to write it, no? As team leader. And silang nagagawa ng distribution. Usually, inuuna nila yung partners nila sa Germany. Marami silang partners doon. Tapos, partners nila sa iba't ibang bansa. Tapos yung natitira, nandito sa Pilipinas. So, wala rin na. Sila lang naman talaga nagdi-distribute niyan eh.
Orion, pahiram na lang pag bumalik ka ng Manila. Baka pwedeng
I can give you a link to it online. It's
okay.
There's an online copy. So,
okay, sige,
unlimited yan kasi it's online. And then you just print it if you have access to a laser printer. Yan.
Dr. Clare, gusto ko.
Ang dami na nga kasing humihingi. So humingi, siyempre, poor lang naman ako. Hindi ako makareprint sa sarili ko. Sabi ko, pakireprint ko nga yan. Sabi nung present resident representative, wala daw silang selipi para sa reprinting. So, anong magagawa?
Sayang naman, Dr. Clare. Pero sana i-share natin yung magandang good reads ko rin for people who are interested.
Tingin ko, Ron, yung mga contacts mo sa DILG, baka pwede nilang i-print yun. Kasi if I'm not mistaken, I think that the copyright of that means na pwede naman siyang ipaprint kasi it's available online naman eh. So
about these things you know.
Yeah.
I don't care about authorship basta lumabas yung libro.
That's great, Dr. Clare.
Lampas na ako doon.
We'll
and
be
the
an
good thing
advocate for
about
that.
the book, the good thing about the book, Ron, is it's fully 3-point agenda compliant. As in, like, tanggal 60-40, nandyan, check. Parliamentary, check. Federalism, check. Nandyan lahat. I mean, kaya ako nagustuhan yung libro kasi, pareho-pareho sa matagal ko ng pinaglalaban. Parang ganun. And that inspired me to set up the correct movement because I saw that I was not alone, you know.
I can only wish, Doc Clare, if this were a different time, if you can actually go back and enroll to your classes. Sobrang siguro nun.
Well, I continue to teach. Kaya lang, Ron, ayoko. By the way, I teach at the Ateneo. I'm a faculty at the European Studies, no?
Okay.
Ayun.
Great. Ayun. Guys. Dr. Clare, going back to what you said about the Constitution being too long, no? And it should be a short Constitution. And Constitution should be sort of like a framework. It should be something that shouldn't be as, diba? The question kasi, let me
saka mo na i-flesh out yung iba. Skeleton
tama.
lang.
So meron mga tinatawag na, if there are IRRs, like you said kanina, if there are laws that should implement certain provisions of the Constitution, then that's something that the Congress should thresh out eventually, but not put in the Constitution. But hear me out, guys, Doc and Orion. Kasi ang metaphor for what's happening right now with government in our country kasi it's like a movie. And the problem is the cast of characters can seem to they are not being casted the right way. So we have people in government, in Congress, as much as I hate to say this, it's been an ongoing problem. It's been decades, and the cast of characters haven't really changed. And for us to be able to change the Constitution, we need the right people, the right mindset to make it happen. And it's been hard for us to convince these people because, syempre, karamihan sa kanila, Doc Clare, self-interest lang iniisip. So, hindi talaga ma-forward natin yung gusto nating systemic changes na mangyari at this point in time. So, given the premise, do you think the Constitution, if ever we did get a chance, and if we can go around this problem that we have right now, that we don't have the proper people to support or even push it forward or further than economic provisions, consider the Constitution as being the bedrock of a democracy. Do you think structural systemic remedies should be written into the Constitution because the system is at the moment flawed para hindi na pwedeng baguhin ng kahit sino man. Kasi I think that's the basic concept and that's why mahaba yung debate dyan eh. Kasi ang mga tao ayaw nilang baguhin yung Constitution dahil magiging permanent kung ano man yung provision na ilalagay doon. What can you say about that, Dr. Clare?
Hindi naman pwede yung constitution mo, jello, nanginginig siya, no? Dapat ang constitution mo firm. Nakita mo ba yung skeleton? Merong nagmo-move na parts, di ba? But alam mo
Yes.
yung relationship ng bone dito sa aking shoulder at saka yung arm ko. Alam mo yung relationship ng the other parts of the skeleton. Ganon yun eh. Alam mo din kung anong relationship ng mga organs which will be within the skeleton. Firm dapat yun. Hindi dapat yung naglalakad. Hindi dapat siya nagmo-move. Ang magmo-move, yung mga nitty-gritty nun, yung mga maliliit na bagay, yung sinasabi natin na nagre-rely sa dynamics of the political system. Huwag ka maglalagay doon about the system of political parties because pwedeng one party, pwedeng two party, pwedeng multi-party. Huwag mong ilalagay yan sa constitution. Kasi tignan mo in Germany, hindi ba ngayon unity party sila? Eh kung nakalagay sa kanilang basic law two-party system, di nag-violate na sila. You don't put many things in the constitution which should in fact be brought about by the political dynamics which is so changing. But having said that, the structural integrity should be there. Yung relationship among parts should be there. Otherwise, wala na lang, maski saan na lang nagpupunta yung skeleton mo. Even the constitution of the skeleton itself, kung ano yung fabric niya, ilalagay mo din yan. No, hindi ba sabi ng mga tao ngayon, at 64 million tayo nagboboto-boto, mga iba nga dyan dapat hindi magboto kasi mga bobo hindi nga nagbabasa, tabloid lang binabasa. But yes, you want to change that. Then, baguhin mo yung fabric nun, di ba? Ibig sabihin, go back to the fundamentals. Pero, wag mong pakialaman yung detalya niya. Kasi yung detalya, matagal yung constitution, di pwedeng bago-bago ka lang na magtatagal yung constitution. That is why, broad strokes lang. And as I said, like doing a curriculum, dapat makita mo muna yung outcome. When we were helping the PMA, nung nasa defense pa ako, nagpatulong yung PMA ayusin yung curriculum nila. Siyempre, big ako sa human rights. So, inintroduce ko yung international humanitarian law. Siyempre, inintroduce ko din yung geopolitics Orion, which I'm teaching. Sabi ko, Putres, itong mga bata na to, walang alam dun sa mga Kashmir, Cyprus, mga Palestine. Introduce natin yan. But how did I do it? To help them. Tinignan ko ano yung dulo. Ano bang PMA sa dulo after the 4-year period? What should a PMAer look like in terms of his knowledge, skills, competencies? Then, nag-reverse engineer ako. Para makita ko itong bata na to na PMAer, ano ang makikita ko sa kanyang curriculum? Diba? That's how we designed it. Well, unfortunately, nung nagbago yung commandant, di na sayang lang yung oras ko dun.
Sayang.
Sayang, di ba?
That actually, Doc Clare, yun yung that epitomizes what's been going on with our current system. No, what makes it broken. If we do a deep dive of what's going on with our current system right now, basically somebody like you proposing a very sound proposal to change or improve the system, and then someone who is already embedded in the system are the ones who are kumbaga preventing it from happening. So that's why my next question is sort of like related to that. And you mentioned earlier when you were part of government, you were actually asked by people na, "Oy, Doc, kunin mo yung 4 million." 'Di ba? Within government, may mga tao nagsasabi ng ganun. So ang tanong, Doc, the establishment, do you think the establishment, the people, when I talk about the establishment, the people who have been in government for a long time, yung mga tinatawag nating career politicians, career employees of government, yung tinatawag nating, ang term pa nga sa kanila is yung plantilla. Do you think ang problema natin systemically is the outlive the incumbents, the ones who are being elected to office, the ones who have promising, for example, President Duterte right now is implementing changes, reforms. But the system or the government itself and the people behind it are not exactly there. May term ako dyan, Doc Clare, na-mention ko sa mga kasamahan ko before sa DILG. Compliant lang talaga sila sa mga bagong polisiya. Pero kung tutuusin mo yung nilang yung sariling iniisip nila Yung iniisip talaga nila, yung kanilang philosophy is to survive and to earn. So wala silang pakialam kung may mga systemic changes na ginagawa. Ang iniisip lang nila yung pang sarili nilang benefits. So ang tanong dyan, Doc Clare, how do you revamp this? How do you actually change government when the people who are within the system, and I actually, Orion, kasama rin ito dun sa aking napanood na interview kay Snowden, no? Yung informant, yung whistleblower from the NSA. Sabi niya, kitang-kita mo dito, ito yung example niya eh. Noong 2001 daw, Doc Clare, nagkaroon ng yung tinatawag na 9/11. Nung nag-crash yung eroplano sa Manhattan, sa Twin Towers. Ang una daw ginawa ng CIA at ng NSA is umalis sa kanilang bases, sa kanilang opisina. They didn't stay in the offices to find out more information on what's happening. They instead thought about their survival instead of thinking of how to counteract. So ibig sabihin, there is a certain part in government that wants to self-protect itself. No matter who the president is, no matter who you elect, who will run that government, yung mga tao doon ay mas matagal yung kanilang lifespan working for government, that sometimes when you initiate changes, it's only as good as the incumbent.
These are the guys
people,
that they're referring to as deep state. Actually, that's what they call
yes,
the deep state. Yun yung mga taong mostly career civil servants,
yes,
or basta people who are not related to the actual the incumbents nga, the
people
politicians.
who are maintaining the status quo for that particular government. So, Dr. Clare, based on your studies, how do you change something like that? I mean, that is deeply rooted in our system.
Well, definitely with great difficulty. But again, the quick answer there is change the structure. When you change the parliamentary system, that means that you will not have now a case where, the whole caboodle of undersecretaries, assistant secretaries, up to director level, 5,000 plus of them will have to be changed. That will not happen. A parliamentary system would need a permanent bureaucracy. By
Yes.
permanent bureaucracy, we need to have a civil servant, a group of civil service people who are honest, who are people of integrity, and the bureaucracy where, nasa libro ko to sa bureaucratic reform, where you are not dealing with duplication of functions, overlaps, and unclear lines of authority. You change the bureaucracy. Marcos among the presidents is the best president in terms of changing the bureaucracy. Kami yung unang-unang nag-change ng Career Foreign Service in development program diyan sa sa DAP, sa Tagaytay. Yung mga tinitrain, tapa ko na mga early 70s yun 72, 73, hindi ko na matatandaan yan. But yes, you change the bureaucracy because bureaucracy is the daily way of doing things. Sabi mo, bakit yung mga tao masyadong self-interest nila? Because in the past, meron silang initiative, meron silang innovative ideas. Hindi mo pinakaialaman eh. Sabi mo, Hoya, ikaw palagi ka na lang nagsasabi ng pagbabago ha, tumigil ka dyan, shut up please. So nag-shut up siya, sabi niya, sige na lang, hintay ko na lang mag-retire ako. Diba? But, sabihin mo lang, ginawa ko to sa NDCP maliit lang na yan, kolegyo, 126 military and civilian. Sabi ko, dahil bago yung building bagong-bago yung building, August ako nagpunta ron. Abay, September, nagtutulo na yung building na 200 million, no? At saka yung kernel na nangialam nun, yung bahay niya at saka yung building magkapareho. Mga pinto, mga
Pareho kontrakto.
Sabi ko, mula ngayon, sabi ko, measuring nyo yung mga windows, etc. like that. Magbibigay ako siyempre, tinanong ko muna yung controller ko dahil ang tanga-tanga ko naman nun tungkol sa mga kowa-kowa. Measuring yung mga windows, etc. Nakita ninyo yung anomalya between yung pinromesa ng contractor at yung dineliver. Bigyan ko kayo ng 10%. Di ang daming nakitang anomalya. Liit na bagay
It's really all about rewards and punishment. So if you give rewards, diba, people will go where the rewards are. So
incentivize mo yung good behavior.
Incentivize,
It doesn't require money, ha? Napansin ko, sabi ko, kakabili lang natin ng host. Sino naggupit-gupit nito? Ha? Ako kasi siyempre, wala ako, sa katangahan ko bilang administrator, siyempre binasa-basa ko yung sa COA, bawal pala yung kotse na iuwi mo sa bahay. So lahat nasa motor pool, no? Siyempre, daming nagalit sa akin. Bakit na lang, tuwing ang lapit-lapit ng bahay ko dito sa UP, parang palagi na lang humihingi ng perang panggasolina yung driver. Sabi ko, teka muna, yung pala, idugtong mo dun sa ginupit-gupit na hose. Siyempre, pinapangsip nila sa gabi yung hose, pinapangsip nila ng gasolina.
Nako, tapos binibenta sa
yung
iba.
simple? Orion, sa area mo to. Siyempre, yung sasakyan, merong parang naglalagay yung, yung kilometer, di ba? Bago yung sasakyan. Sabi ko, tuwing gabi, isusulat sa isang notebook kung ano yung nakasulat. Merong magsusulat doon kung ano yung number. Siyempre, may assumption ka yung consumption per whatever, di ba, sa gasolina. Total ang bahay ko, 4 kilometers lang from the Camp Aguinaldo, ganyan-ganyan. Alam mo, nung nalaman ng mga drivers ng 6 na sasakyan na merong ganong record, wala na nagpuputol ng hose at saka wala na nagsisip-sip. Diba? Maliit na bagay. Kasi alam mo yan, embedded yung corruption sa sistema. Nakalagay, sabi mo, Ryan, susundan mo yung papel? Wala kang makikita dyan. Kasi nakalagay sa papel, yung bala $2. Interviewin mo yung yung hindi nakapanalo sa bidding. Sabi niya, actually ma'am, $1 lang yan. Kaya mo nilagay $2 kasi magsasabog ka ng pera dun sa mga babayad-bayaran mo. Umpisahan mo magmula secretary pababa.
Grabe.
The paper table na. But the only way for you to do that, kasi insider na ako. Alam ko na. Diba? Ngayon, kung magnanakaw ako at I'm not a person of integrity and a stupid person, then magnanakaw din ako. Diba? Dahil sabi ko, wala namang napipreso. But the fear is there, no? The fear prevented me from really being corrupt. And yeah, sa mga UP kasi dapat hindi nagnanakaw, diba?
I was going to say, Ron, kanina, di ba parang na-mention yung about yung mga system, yung paano ba to, yung either two-party system or multi-party system, ganyan. And usually when we look at these countries that have what appears to be a two-party system, they have nothing in their law and they have nothing in their constitution that says dapat two parties lang. It just emerges like that as a result of their electoral system. So like the US, for example, parang there's nothing in their law at all. Nothing in their constitution that says dapat Democrats and Republicans lang ang two main parties. Wala, you're actually free to have a third party or whatever. Kaya nga may Rospero dati, at saka sino pa yung iba. But what happens is the dynamics there is in the electoral system because of actually there's this thing called Maurice Duverger's law, which is the law of what kind of electoral system you have. So if you have a majoritarian system like first past the post, which is what we're basically using, but if you have that in a parliamentary system, or a system similar to it, like the US Electoral College, you will eventually end up only having a two-party system because yung mga natatalong parties madidismaya sila na eventually they will stop, parang they will not keep on fielding candidates when they keep on losing. So ang mangyayari lang usually is winner and the best loser. Yun yung nag-emerge. So magkakaroon ka talaga ng two-party system because of that. And in the case of the Philippines, for example, there was a study by Dr. She's a friend of mine, si Dr. Yuko Kasuya. Her book is Presidential Bandwagon Parties and Party Systems in the Philippines. Yung finding naman niya was the Philippines had a almost de facto two-party system, not because of any law saying that there should only be two parties, but because we did not have term limits. So back then, we had everybody from below vice president and president could run unlimited, diba? And at the same time, the president and vice president could also run for a second term. And as a result of that, the ability of the incumbent president to run for a second term, it actually caused any challengers. So kunyari ikaw, nationalista ka, ikaw yung panalo, yung pag nandun ka sa Liberal Party dati, parang yung mga Liberal Party, takot sila na mamahati yung boto nila at mananalo yung incumbent kung marami sila. So nangyayari, and third parties were very rare. So that there was a time that there was a third part, there were like three parties na three contenders lumabas, si Garcia, si Macapagal, and the actor si De La Rosa. Si Rogelio De La Rosa. And those three, parang ang nangyari doon sa tatlo, dahil nga ang lakas-lakas ni, syempre yung perception mo is malakas yung incumbent kasi he's got an incumbency advantage, ganyan. Yung challenger, yung two challengers, at some point they decide to join forces. So what happened there was si Rogelio De La Rosa, he decided to step out and defer to his kabalen, who is also his bayaw, as it turns out. So lumakas si Macapagal, naging kumbaga yung supposedly three parties, naging dalawang party lang. So because of the need to be strong as a challenger against the incumbent, nagko-consolidate yung mga tawag nito, yung mga challengers. Eh ngayon, right now, because of the system that we have, we don't have an incumbent running for a re-election because we have a single-term presidency. What happens is nagjo-jostle, everybody's jostling to be a candidate on his own, and hating-hati talaga yung boto. That's why we have this mess, because of the imposition of term limits actually created this so-called unintended consequences. And there you go. Yung ngayon, ganyan, ang gulo-gulo ng sistema natin dahil sa term limits.
Alam mo, Orion, maganda na na-point out mo yung mga problema kasi sa final few minutes ng ating a time with Dr. Clare. Kasi Dr. Clare, I know you're
matutulog na siya.
Baka way past your bedtime na, Doc.
Pasensya na po.
May mga few questions na lang ako kasi I think the best way to convince people why we need to change the Constitution is to actually find out what the flaws are. And one of them happens to be itong insistence of having that in place, having term limits. And I think the reason na nagkaroon ng wrong connotation on Chacha, naging bad term before when Ramos proposed to change the Constitution, because his initial kumbaga interest or agenda was to scrap the term limits, to extend probably his term. Ay yun na kagad na naging common notion for most people that Chacha or constitutional reform is about extending limits. Ngayon, it's apparent that that's not really a problem if that did happen, because ultimately kung sino yung magaling, tatagal talaga at hindi na kailangang i-circumvent yung batas para lang mag-maintain yung power. So ang next question ko, Professor, is isang problema namin sa DILG before when I was still working for them as a consultant is itong tandem voting, for example. Bakit ba nila naisip? Ang narinig ko kasi kay dating Justice Davide, the reason daw na merong vice president can be from another party para magkaroon ng check and balance na yung executive. So, na yung vice presidente daw pwedeng maging adverse. Sabi ko, bakit? Ganun nga nangyayari ngayon for the wrong reasons. So, Doc Clare, let's start with that. Ano ba ang talagang rationale behind na hindi tandem voting ang nangyari sa president at vice president at naging pwede ang vice president from another party?
Well, unang-una, wag ka nakikinig doon sa taong sinabi mo, no? Pangalawa, kopya-kopya tayo sa US Constitution. Kanya nga si John Locke yung tatay natin, yung paano natin, yung ninong natin, no? Ating tignan mo, hindi nga tayo federal, bicameral lang ating kasi nga nangopya-ngopya tayo sa US. Huwag na tayong mangopya, no? Itanim natin yung halaman ng Constitution na ayon sa kultura natin. No? So, wala naman tandem vote eh. Nangopya na naman tayo sa Amerika. Sa Amerika, siyempre, tama yung sinabi ni Orion, the electoral system really would design what the profile of the electors would be, of the governors would be. And it is skewed against nuisance or small parties. Kasi nagsasayang sila ng panahon, nagsasayang din sila ng boto. That's the reason why political parties really have to present a fairly good program of government to us 64 million voters and say, okay, pag inelect nyo kami, there will be universal basic income. Pag inelect nyo kami, lahat na ng hospital magiging tertiary hospital. Operational ha, Ron, ha? Walang mga big words. Lahat ng hospital, tertiary hospitals. At, pero, ang magiging ano nito, ang pagkukunan ng natin ng salipin nito, in taxes natin. So magbigay tayo ng X% ng tax natin at libre na lahat. Libre yung sa ngipin, libre hanggang sa PhD, hindi lang ngayon sa BA and BS. Dahil ngayon, MA, PhD may bayad na eh. Bakit mo iniwan ito na yung MA and PhD? And pag ako nanalo, sasabihin ng programa ng political party, ibabalik ko na yung pinaghiwa-hiwalay nyo na TESDA, CHED, at saka DepEd kasi mali yung pinaghiwalay nyo yan. Magkakaroon tayo. Operational terms, di ba? So, to go back to my earlier theme, we need the political parties to really be in the middle of the governors and the governed. We need the political parties to have their own party institute so that hindi pwede yung isa nang galing ng sa kawayan, hinugot mo, bigla mo na, hindi nga naging dog catcher sa barangay, bigla mo na lang pinabulusok doon sa national position. Siyempre, ang bobo-bobo nun, nag-aaral pa. Diba? O kaya, dahil inelect mo si ganito ron, dahil may namatay, basta may namatay, ini-elect mo yung kinamatayan, Ba't natin ginagawa yan? If you have a party institute, natandaan mo si Tony Blair ron, ng Labour Party. Si Tony Blair, parang 16, 17 years old pa lang siya. At alam na niyang gusto niyang mapunta sa politika, pumasok siya sa Labour Party. Hinubog yan, hindi yan biglang naging premier ng UK. No? Hindi yan biglang nanggaling sa kawayan at talagang hinubog siya sa leadership. Lahat ng political parties dapat merong party institute. Hindi pwedeng kung saan-saan ka ngayon nag-iimbita. Dapat within your political party, the stalwart of your party, you are going to choose who is going to run where. Now, bakit yung political party member will plug his umbilical cord sa kanyang party? Kasi yung kanyang campaign expenses, yung radio time niya, yung TV time niya, yan naman, sinabi ni Orion sa electoral system nila, nakasalalay dun sa vote na nakuha ng party the previous election. Nakita mo yung kanyang political life, nakadikit sa political party. Kaya pag singilan, Ron, ha? Remember, ginastusan ka namin sa campaign, etc. like that. Remember, we are voting on universal basic income. Ito yung ating position dito. You have a party vote. Nakita mo dugtong-dugtong yung yung narrative, diba? And therefore, if you change your political color, you're committing political suicide. Hindi ka naman tatanggapin doon sa kabila eh. O asan na yung salapi mo pag-run? Diba? Lalo na sa UK, wala namang residence requirement yun. You can run anywhere.
Right.
Dapat tayo,
Exactly.
wala na rin tayong residence requirement. Maraming dapat ayusin. Pero, kung yung gumagawa ng constitution, the ones who are crafting the constitution, merong ganitong malaking dibuho sa isip nila on what the political outcomes are, no? Then maganda yung magiging resultang dokumento. The beauty of the democracy is that you may lose today, after 1,000 days, you may in fact be a winner. The fact that you can win later is really the beauty of democracy. Di tulad sa authoritarian regimes na, miski anong gawin mo, magtatatanong ka, abay, nakapaskil na yung nandyan. Yan ang beauty. And another, is that the beauty of democracy is that you have different political outcomes. Di ba? Di ba ang ganda? So, contest talaga eh. Liberal democracy, you have the notion of that you have the expectation of the good life, and at the same time, you have individual rights, no? Which you may not have in other alternative regimes.
Professor Clare, I remember there's one movie I saw before, and I remember they were talking about government. The beauty of a democracy din daw is most of the framers they understand that they are not perfect, and the Constitution in itself is a living body that should change over time depending on the needs of its constituents or the people who are being served by it. Tama ba yung Doc Clare? So, bakit hindi nagtagal ng ganito na hindi pa rin ayaw nilang baguhin yung Constitution ayon sa sa pangangailangan ng ating mga mamamayan?
It will require a little bit more convincing, and to repeat, I like the fact that there are young people gunning for the national positions, and The evidence tells us that young people are more likely to be open-minded, not bigots, and they can change their minds with compelling evidence.
I wanted to mention, no, I find it funny nga na ano eh na we've had this 1987 Constitution ever since 1987 without a single change, like a single comma or period has been changed. Wala, zero changes. When we keep on forgetting that when the US had their constitution, it took them just a few years. They had an amendment. Tayo, 1935 Constitution. Just five years after 1935, we had the ratification of that draft, diba? 1940, we immediately had a new set of amendments. I mean, the original 1935 Constitution actually had 6 years no election. Kaya nga yung first term ni Quezon was 6 years, no? And they did not even have any senators back then. And then in 1940 they amended the Constitution. Just 5 years, 5 years after they amended it so that they would say ay hindi na lang 6 years, magiging 4 years with re-election. And at the same time, they also created, well, unfortunately, the monstrosity we know as the Senate. so the Senate was created also by that same amendment. But my point is, nakapag-amendment sila just 5 years after the 1935 Constitution. So parang bakit ngayon ayaw nilang baguhin ang dapat baguhin? Diba?
Doc Clare, tamang-tama na mention mo yung Senate Orion kasi gusto kong tanungin kay Prof. Ano ba ang rationale behind having a Senate? Kasi sa parliamentary system wala namang Senado. Bakit ba pinipilit natin sa ating bansa na magkaroon ng Senado nung panahon na yon? Dahil lang gusto natin kopyahin ng mga Amerikano or meron bang merits talaga?
I'll just correct, no. Meron ding actually sa mga countries na merong parliamentary system. There are many of them that have a second like an upper chamber. So it's not true na kapag sinabi mong parliamentary, walang second chamber. What is true, however, is that in a parliamentary system, the second chamber is always weaker than the lower chamber. The lower chamber is always the stronger house. It's always the executive house.
And so, it's the lower chamber because they are represented by electoral districts that will really define who the government of the day will be.
Yes.
And that's also the second chamber who will kick out the government of the day. Kaya nga, nakita mo sa Great Britain, which is the mother of parliaments, yung House of Lords halos hindi naman siya na-dedyaryo, di ba?
Halos wala.
Some substantive, Pero it's really the commons na makikita mo na nangingialam na day-to-day governance. And if you'll notice, si Boris Johnson and hindi ko matandaan ngayon yung head ng Labour Party, makita mo
Starmer. Yeah.
Magkaharap sila.
Yes,
and there's really a
harap.
short gangway between them. No? Ang ganda ng physical structure ng House of Commons. In fact, lahat ng tungkol sa filosofiya ng parliamentary system nandun. Yung term na crossing the aisle, it's really that aisle. It's really that short gangway. If you cross the aisle, you really change political color from conservative to labor. You would have committed political suicide. Backbenchers, kasi nakaupo ka dun sa back.
Sa likod, yes.
Dahil nasa harap ka, di ba? Kaya maganda, Ryan, when I was teaching European politics, yan ang una kong pinapakita. Siyempre, wala pa naman ng mga video noon, So, yung, ano ba yung ginagamit noon? Basta yung mga fossil na kagamitan. Papakita mo yung debuho ng House of Commons na mga 1/3 or 1/4 lang ng 650 members of the House of Commons can be accommodated there. And if you will notice, hindi individual yung kanilang mga mesa, di ba? Parang nasa
bench lang
sila.
Just bench.
Parang nag-uusap-usap lang sila eh. Di ba? Yung parliament, di ba? Parler, from the French to speak.
Parler, to speak.
Magandang
interesting.
Explain yun. Pero siguro, yung sagot dun sa tanong ni Ron kanina, it's really with great difficulty that we will have to influence the decision makers who will be in the chambers, itong dalawang chambers na to, that we really need constitutional changes. Otherwise, we will have more of the same things. Ang pinakamaganda siguro compelling argument would be yung sinabi ko kanina, we're such a rich nation in terms of natural resources and in terms of human resources. Gusto ba nila ganito na lang palagi yung political outcome natin? When there is a more desirable outcome, dapat magdidibuho ka ng more desirable outcome. And when you have, the juxtaposition of the outcome now and the outcome at a later time, I think that is a selling point, no? And
Indeed,
that
indeed.
is a powerful selling point.
I did want to to add to basically complement whatever Prof Clare was saying, that when we look, for example, at the history of Singapore, back in the 50s and 60s, when they first started having all these elections, the vast majority of their people were extremely uneducated, extremely poor, extremely uneducated. Sobrang mas edukado pa ang mga Pilipino. Tapos hindi lang sa edukado, marunong pa tayong mag-Ingles. Back then, talagang as in like functionally illiterate sila sa English ang majority sa kanila. At hindi nga pati nga Mandarin hindi sila marunong kasi dialects lang, Chinese dialects lang ang alam ng marami sa kanila. So talagang it's generally you would say they were generally uneducated. However, even though uneducated yung kanilang majority population back then, nakakuha sila ng magagaling na mga leader katulad ni Lee Kuan Yew. And the reason for that was precisely because naka-parliamentary system sila. Ngayon, kung ang Singapore ay hindi gumamit ng parliamentary system dati, sabihin natin naka-presidential system sila, with the kind of electorate that they had na sobrang illiterate and sobrang uneducated and sobrang poor, what would they get? Football player, cabaret star, mga actor, singer. Yun yung magiging mga leader nila kung naging presidential system sila dati. But luckily, hindi. Because of the parliamentary system, puro magagaling yung mga naging leaders nila. So, ganun lang kasimple.
Doc Clare, alam mo, based on our conversation tonight, kasi sa Istoryang Futbolero, Prof, meron kaming tinatawag na the big takeaway sa aming conversation. So, we really believe after like an hour or so having a conversation, you usually have something to pick up from. When you go home, meron kang maisip, tama pala, sabi ni Doc Clare, ganito. So one of the things sana I wanted to bring up before we end our conversation in Istoryang Futbolero is I just realized that there is a corrective mechanism in place still in our democracy, which is the electorate, the elections, the right to suffrage. Everything is dependent on our people to vote for the right congressman, right local executive, or the right senator or president for that matter. So if we did improve the level of understanding of our electorate, do you think that the chances of us having these reforms will be faster? And how do we go about that if we were to come up with solutions on improving the level of understanding of our electorate in voting for the right people? Not only voting for the right people, but having the right people also push themselves to become an alternative to the current people who are governing. Anong masasabi mo dyan, Doc Clare, about voter education?
Well, thank you, Ron. You have mentioned the magic word, education. Education is the best social accelerator. Education is the best route to social and political change. Education is the best population manager. You don't need to have laws to manage your population. You educate the girl child and you have a built-in population management. Education is the key. And leadership matters because leadership will emanate from educated electorate. So never mind that maybe I erred when I compared myself to the age of the Republic. We are a young Republic, 75 years old. Many, in fact, have gone through civil war, killed each other before they even, reach a level of equilibrium in their society and they're a little bit happy about what's happening. I think we are much, much better in terms of our personal attributes. We're a generally kind and loving people, compassionate. We don't even, hindi natin kailangan magpanggap diba? Kasi nando na innate na sa atin yun. So let us build on this attribute. Siguro, ang takeaway natin dito sa conversation na ngayon is institutions matter. In fact, one major indicator of a failed state or about to fail state is when you start compromising the institutions. Kasi yun ang unang bubuwagin mo no? Hindi yung tao, yung institution ang unang buwagin mo and babagsak yung yung estado. So institutions matter, leadership matters. And so siguro those who are listening in on this conversation, yes, you young people, you represent more than 70% of the 64 million qualified voters. Please indicate your desire on May 9. Because if you don't have any business complaining about any aspect of our political life.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clare. This has been a very elucidating conversation, to say the least, Orion. At
Totally.
Sabi ko kay Orion, Doc, sabi ko, please naman, i-invite mo naman si Doc Clare sa ating programa. Dapat we should have yung kapani-paniwala na nagsasalita dito. Tagal na nating kinukulit yung ating mga viewers.
Let's try to not make this the last. Dapat maybe siguro next month we have another. I mean, syempre hindi naman sobrang the last kasi kailangan din yung matulog na maaga. But it's good to have parang regular and then it can also be slightly different topics also, 'di ba? Kasi it's really a
Doc Clare,
huge,
actually we're very flexible. If you need to come in earlier, pwede natin gawin yung Istoryang Futbolero at 8 o'clock kung gusto mo.
Oo. Parang medyo gabi yung 9 o'clock.
Oo nga Yung iba kasi siguro baka stuck in traffic kaya ganun pero if we can make it earlier, I think people will will
Thank
really.
you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Prof Clare. Really happy to have had this.
Yeah.
Alam mo, Prof, marami nagpapasalamat sa ating mga viewers. No, actually, marami tayong mga comments na pumasok at talagang natutuwa sa ating conversation ngayong gabi. At sana hindi ito maging the last time. If yun na nga, we can adjust to your time. We can do this once a month. We can call it like a Constipation Friday with with Professor Clarita Carlos, diba? Tapos sabi sila Anwar nagpapasalamat, sila Virdel, Renato, Gabi, Lacson, Fel Fresco, Yan Benedict, maraming salamat sa pagnood. At sabi nila, we love this daw, Doc. Sabi
maraming
ni Gabi
maraming fans si Doc, Prof Clare. Actually, ang daming fans talaga.
Ayun, at si Pons Martinez also, salamat Doc Clarita for joining Istoryang Futbolero. And to Real Magduhan, Michael Mirasol, Rudville Amaro, at si Adrian Tepes, Hiles Gargilla, Mikhail, John David, Virdel Abukahin, at yung ating mga Doc, maraming mga OFW yung nakikinig sa atin ngayon. So, ngayon umaga pa siguro sa kanila at saka hapon. Magandang umaga at saka magandang hapon sa inyong lahat, no? At alam ko, namimiss ninyo ang ating bansa. Buti na lang meron tayong mga ganitong mga balitaktakan dito sa Istoryang Futbolero para you can feel closer to home nga. Ika nga, Prof Clare. Prof, do you have any final shout out? Yun yung mga meron kayong gustong batiin?
Wala naman. Siguro ang hinihingi ko lang lalo na sa ating kabataan, parang nalilimutan nyo na atang magbasa at yan ang mga part ng scholarship natin ay talagang kailangan patuloy tayong magbasa, no? Hindi lang yung mga tabloid dyan o yung mga maliliit na 1 sentence at 2 sentences. Talagang part ng learning natin is magbasa talaga tayo dahil doon lang lalawak ang ating karunungan. At you will notice habang lumalawak ang karunungan natin, we become more and more humane, we become more and more tolerant of other human beings. Siguro yun na lang ang concluding statement ko ngayong gabi nito, and maraming salamat for making me part of this conversation, Orion and Ron.
Thank you very much,
That is an empirical
Prof.
fact, Orion.
Empirically true.
Thank you, Prof. Based Kasi part ng aming mga reminders, Professor, sa ating mga viewers bago kami magpaalam, mask, iwas, hugas, at huwag magkalat ng fake news. Dapat pag-aralan lahat ng mga naririnig nyo sa balita or sa social media. Dapat basahin at maging mas mapagmatsyag sa ating mga naririnig. At pag-aralan ng mabuti. Huwag tayong tatamad-tamad magbasa. Yun yung pinaka-point dyan. Good night, Doc Clare. Prof. Clare, for maraming salamat. Orion, we appreciate you very much.
Ron, very happy ka ngayon,
Oh!
Oo, di ba?
Ayun. So, paano to, Orion? Gawa na natin yung isa sa mga bucket list natin na invite na natin si Doc Clare sa Istoryang Futbolero.
Exactly.
It's all downhill from here.
Kaya nga sabi ko, let's not make this the last time. So, I mean, next time, we can probably have an earlier show, tapos nandito siya, and especially siguro if there is a certain topic that she would like to probably talk about. We can. I mean,
tayong mga questions that requires her technical ability or
yes,
expertise. We can ask her during her time, no? Kahit na she doesn't have to stay as long as us. Pwede 8 o'clock to 9 si Doc, tapos yung the rest of the time tayo na. Pwede siya magpaalam ng maaga.
Yeah, exactly.
Diba?
Yes.
Kasi mukhang may hirap na yung tinaasan natin yung yung level
yung antas.
Yung antas eh.
It's a hard act to follow. It's a tough act to follow, man.
Exactly. Yari tayo. Eksperto talaga. Eksperto yung ating pinasalita dito. Yung tipong pwede ipagtapat sa mga sa mga yung so-called experts ng kabila.
Oo. Kukunin ko rin yung isa naming kaibigan na siguro si Doc Ed Araral. So taga Davao gyapon na siya. Taga Davao siya of Ilocano extraction. Pero taga dito siya. And so although dili kay siya magbinisaya kaayo, pero taga Davao gid siya. Ang iyang amahan ang nag-founder sa katong University of Southern Philippines ba to? Si pangalan tong USEP ba to? Sa Davao man na siya. Ang iyang amahan is the founder of that the school where Bato did his PhD.
Oh, okay. Sabi
University of Southeastern Philippines. Ayun pala.
Sabi ni Gabi Lacson, Araral is
great.
Is really great. Okay, good.
Yeah. He met him in person as well.
All right. Orion, maganda tong natin. This could be a turning point for our Constipation Friday.
Yep.
We'll get more people to come in, and it seems like it's been a very ito yung gusto natin, Ryan, magkaroon ng value dun sa ating mga
actually to be honest, I don't know if you know that I'm currently suspended 30 days, no?
What?
Oh I got suspended on Monday because basically ang daming haters ko dahil sa NAS issue, 'di ba? Kasi parang sinabi ko sa maraming tao na huwag kayong maghuhusga, huwag kayong biglang huramentado. Ang daming nag-away sa akin. Tapos, nag-insulto sila sa akin. Tapos, I fought back. And in fighting back, sabi ko, parang inaano nila ako, ininsulto nila ako. Tapos, i-quote ko. Sabi mo, ganito ako. Yung kinu-quote ko yung sinabi nila. Pero, nasaan ang proof mo? Ganyan. Tapos, yung yung kinote ko, tapos nandun yung mga gago, engot, ganyan, kung ano-ano pang mga pang-insulto papunta sa akin. Sabi ko, nasaan ang proof mo? Yun, na tawag nito, na Facebook, na mass report yata. So ako yung natamaan. Pero okay lang, kasi ngayon, mas nakaka-concentrate ako sa trabaho. Talagang ako sa trabaho. Kaya ako,
Biktima ka na naman ng mga CPP-NPA operatives.
Oo, nabiktima tayo ng mga woke at saka ekot. So, but that's okay. Kasi look, what happened is even though wala yung main account ko, hindi ako maka-post, no. Nakakuha tayo ng 100 plus na viewers. Kasi the idea sana was kung kasama yung account ko, edi siguro mas maraming tao, 'di ba? Kasi linagay ko siya sa correct and a few other affiliated pages. But if it had my page also, my profile, I would have probably been able to get more people. Sadly, I could not because I'm banned. I mean, I'm suspended right now. But that's fine.
Murag nag-contest mo sa imong best friend, si Attorney Ahmed at saka si si saan tawag ni what's her name? She's always like in the hot seat. Si Crisette.
Si Crisette na lagi.
Si Attorney Darwin.
But that's fine.
Mga suki sa Vera Files.
So okay lang.
Sa mga fact-checker.
The fact-checker. Wala. Akin was nothing to do with the fact-checking or whatever. It's
community standards.
Community standards daw. And hindi naman ako nanginsulto. Actually, sila yung nanginsulto sa akin. Tapos, kinuha ko lang yung quote nila. Linagay ko in quotes. Sabi mo sa akin, ganito. Yan. Nasaan ang ebidensya mo? Puta, di ba? Nandyan yung mga bad words nila. Fucking shit, idiot, ganyan-ganyan. Kung ano-ano pang kalokohan. Tapos, kinuot ko lang yun. Ako pa yung natamaan eh. Walang kwenta rin talaga Facebook paminsan, ano. Kung ikaw yung pinaglalaban mo yung katotohanan, ikaw pa yung gagaguhin. I mean, here I am. I'm not even, to be honest, I'm not even technically I'm not defending NAS. I'm defending the truth.
Actually, tama si Nick. Sabi ni Nicky Argonza, tama siya, no? Kasi ito rin yung sasabihin ko sana sa Orion. Yung algorithm ng FB is yun nga medyo stupid. Yung hindi
talaga.
Wala pa kasi alam mo sa early stages pa tayo ng AI ng AI na technology na it's not yet at that point where it can discern or decipher yung proper context.
Wala talaga. Oo. Bad trip talaga. It's sad because I mean so why am I gunning for this issue? No? Why ba't ako sumasawsaw dito sa issue na to? Because I'm basically telling people that do not just believe any accusation or any statement that is said kung walang ebidensya. And what is happening to NAS, I believe, is very, very, very unfair because there is no evidence presented by all those people attacking him that what he's doing is exploitation. In fact, for example, let's look at Huang Od. Huang Od has already long been commercialized. She commercialized herself, and it's not her fault. She's doing the right thing in order to make people appreciate Kalinga culture. Parang kumbaga pinopromote niya yung kultura niya para ang mga tao gagawin sila, uy, maganda yan kasi taga Kalinga yan, and then now people from Kalinga province are proud to be Kalinga, to be Cordillerans because of her. Para bang, uy, sa amin siya. It's like now back then 15 years ago, people did not want to become mambabatok because there was nothing in it. But then when they suddenly saw that there was a lot of praise for it, there was money in it, yung maraming nagpapatattoo sa kanya, doon na lang nagkaroon siya ng mga relatives na nag-apply sa kanya na pwedeng, Lola, paturo naman. Oh, yun. That's the only time when people started seeing within her community na kumikita siya ng pera. And it's so unfair when people are saying na it's NAS's fault. No, NAS is only the provider of the technology. The person who is just providing the platform, but who is actually the one para kumbaga making money out of it, it's actually Huang Od. And nobody made a fuss about that before. I mean, like, she's been doing talks, she's been doing these mga sessions and all that sa maraming mga ganun mga ethnic themed na mga events sa Metro Manila, once in every 5 years or something like that. And she's usually flown in to grace these events, right? Why is it only now that they're making a big fuss about it just because the guy is a foreigner. And then here's the thing. They're putting yung paggagalit nila sa kanya, inaano nila yung parang as if he is from a colonizing country. He's from an oppressed minority. I mean, you know what I'm saying? He's Palestinian. Okay, and okay, he holds an Israeli passport all the more because he lives as a minority within a country that has a totally different ethnicity ruling over everyone else. So, I mean, he's not the epitome of a colonizer. I mean, some people were parang putting down Nas for being parang colonial. What? The guy doesn't even consider himself white. He says he's brown. He says,
I think what's happening here, Ryan, is everything that's parang parang after effect na ito ng mga the initial kumbaga issue. Yung controversy sumibol na lang after a while, and then people have their own opinions, and that's exactly what you've been fighting here. And it doesn't erase the fact that there are people with interests and agendas that they happen to be, you became their bullseye or their target, na parang, uy, ito, dinidepensi itong banata natin.
Oo, ganun sila. Wala, hindi sila nag-iisip. Parang ganun sila, parang, uy, nagmumukha kayo lalong unggoy, mga yung ginagawa ninyo. And then, and I'm basically saying, I'm very sad about this because yung attitude ng hundreds of thousands na Filipinos who did that paghuhuramentado against Nas, you know what's gonna happen? Foreign investors will not want to come to the Philippines. Foreign companies, multinationals will be very, very, very wary and will try to avoid hiring Filipinos next time. Kasi maiisip nila, ito na nga tayo, tinutulungan na nga natin yung Pilipino, tapos paminsan bigla na lang may fake news about us or the company, tayo pa yung sisirain. Look at if we're totally objective about this, what happened to Nas was, Nas is trying to help Hwang Od, especially now during the coronavirus, this COVID-19 issue. There's not that many tourists going to their area because it's lockdown season. So this is going to represent a stream of income that is passive because it's just a video. People just watch a video. Hwang Od does not need to do anything. She had one time na video siya, tapos people will just subscribe to the pay 750 pesos, and then let's say there's 100,000 people who join there. Okay, 750 times 100,000 people. That's a huge amount of money. Parang, di ba? Parang that most of that will go to Hwang Od. And konting part lang yung pupunta sa para sabihin natin 10% ang pupunta diyan sa Nas Academy. Parang lalabas nila na masama si Nas. He's trying to help, and then it will basically kakalat yan around the world. Wag na nating tulungan ng mga Pilipino kasi kung tutulungan mo sila, sasabihin nilang masama kang tao. Para at some point they will destroy you.
Orion, before we wrap up the NAS issue, gusto ko lang tanungin, yung nag-explain ba si Nas kung totoo or nagsalita ba siya kung totoo yung sinabi nung babae na parang coffee farm owner ba
yung
siya?
Cacao farmer. The cacao farmer. He said, I never said anything
to disparage,
derogatory. Yeah, never.
Derogatory against Filipinos' accents.
And his friend, he said, I never said any of that. And then his friend Agon said, how can you say this? See, Project Nightfall. He said, how can you say all those things you were alleging about Nas? I was there. And if ever he said anything like that to me in private, I would have immediately called him out. But he never did because he loves Filipinos. But more importantly, what you said, sabi niya sa kanyang video rebuttal, sabi niya, what you said or what you claim he said is so illogical. Because why will someone like Nas make fun of Filipinos in front of two Filipinos who are not his friends. He just met you and his father and your father just recently. Why will he even mock Filipinos in front of you? He will not. So
Hindi ba
how
na
can
over-
you say that?
Hindi ba sinabi na parang na-overhear daw si Nas na sinabi
No,
niya?
no, no.
Or,
It's not overhearing. It's not overhearing. So let us make that very fucking clear. Nas did not say that. And there is no evidence that he said that. So anyone who believes that immediately without any proof is not following the right procedure, because there is no proof. There should have been some proof. Okay? But if madali lang gumawa ng kwento eh. May screenshot ba tayo na sinabi niya? May wala. Now, logically speaking, bakit ba sasabihin ni Nas yung mga ganyan in front of people na bagong kilala? Ikaw Ron, kung may nakilala kang dalawang may nakilala kang bagong kaibigan na Japanese, magjo-joke ka ba sa kanila ng arigato, karate, gagayan ka, Mitsubishi, Toyota. Gagawa ka ba ng ganyan sa harapan nila? 'Di ba? Hindi mo sila matalik na kaibigan, ha? You're not close friends, and you're not in a comedy show. You are right in front of them. Tapos, are you going to do that? Are you going to make fun of them in front of their faces? Na hindi mo pa sila ganun kakilala. 'Di ba? Hindi, 'di ba? That's the same thing. That's what Agon was saying. It doesn't make sense. It's so illogical, and yet you still think you can do this na parang ang dali-dali lang gumawa ng kwento. And it's very clear what the story is. It's very clear what the story is. Louise Mabulo, the cacao girl, did what she did na manira kay Nas because she wanted revenge. Basically, she was angry that she was not featured on Nas Daily. She felt para kumbaga na-insulto siya na na-insulto siya na pumunta kayo dito tapos yung pala hindi nyo pala ako tapos sinabi nyo pang fake ang social enterprise, which in fact it is fake. It's not a real, it's the real cacao plantation is on her family Hacienda Luisita plantation. May hacienda yung pamilya niya. Naandun sa hacienda nila yung mga kakao. Ngayon yung sinasabing 200 farmers, tangina wala pala, zero pala yun eh. Walang nangyayari. Ang sabi nga ni Agon, the Polish guy, sabi niya, when we went to visit those poor farmers, because we insisted on asking for poor farmers to check them out. Nung nakita namin, puro mga namamatay, yung mga, kumbaga parang walang care na namamatay. The only healthy ones available were the ones on your hacienda. So you know what I'm saying? It's really, so there are three characters. No? The first character is Gracia Palicas. Gracia Palicas is the grandniece of Huang Od. But she's not the only grandniece of Huang Od.
she's the family
She's the
member who got left out. Who felt
she's the family member who got left out. She basically got left out because she's always not around. She's basically always in Metro Manila. She's not in her province. Because ganito yan, si Gracia Palicas right now is always busy doing tattoo workshops, mga masterclass, mga tattoo lectures, ganyan, sa mga DLSU, sa mga baka Ateneo, UP, mga ganun yung, she gives talks about Kalinga tattoo, ganyan, yan. So she's making a name for herself. Okay?
Alam mo, Orion,
Oh.
meron tuloy ako naalala sa kwento na to na very, very similar to a more prominent family.
Oh, ano nangyari?
Remember this pamangkin of the president who kept on saying bad shit about the family?
Ay, oo, yung Noel ba yun?
Oo, si Noel.
Noel? Kaya
Yung
sa kalawang ana, git siya ka na bang muna black sheep ka?
Diba?
Black sheep, ayaw niya, sige, pangguba.
Sige lang,
Sige,
sige lang
pangguba.
panglibak. Sige lang
Sige, panglibak.
panglibak. Unya, siya pala katong abusado na she had like these parang presidential plates na she got caught. Tapos, and she's been like, using her last name to gain advantage. on certain things, tapos siya ang
Grabe.
numero uno na sigilag badmouth sa presidente.
Parang ganun. Yun, si
Parang
Grace
ganun, no?
Palikas.
Oo.
Ganun. Actually, it's like this. Si Grace Palikas, I don't think she would have destroyed the Wangod Academy had she been joined in. Kumbaga kung she had been allowed to join in, like parang sige, we'll wait for you. Sumama ka, we will postpone the meeting until you arrive back here in Buscalan. So parang kumbaga, if they had probably accommodated her, she would not have turned into a taksil, into a traidora. But because parang siguro nagkaroon ng usapan, uy, kailan kami pwedeng punta diyan para sa signing, ganyan. Siguro this coming weekend. Sige, pupunta kami diyan. Tapos biglang tumawag siguro uy, hindi ako makakapunta diyan. Sabi ni Grace siguro, hindi ako makakapunta diyan para sumali. Pwede ipa-postpone na lang. Ay, hindi na pwedeng i-postpone kasi na namin. Sige na, please. Baka kailangan nandiyan din ako para naayos na yung date. Tapos ngayon hindi na siya nakasama, galit siya. No, so ito pa. Si Grace Palikas, bale nagta-tattoo artist siya sa Metro Manila, 'di ba? She's now making a name for herself as a tattoo artist, nagpapasikat siya as Wangod's grandniece. But she's not the only grandniece. There are other grandnieces, there are other apprentices. And when Nas Academy came to their village, they said, let's have this arrangement na i-video natin ngayon si Apo Wangod na doing the tattoo. Tapos after we get the whole footage of that, we will sign up whoever is here na pwedeng maging live lecturer. Kasi meron silang parang Zoom na ginagawa. It's like Zoom or like what we're doing now na Zoom na people can ask questions and parang Q&A. So si Grace, wala siya doon eh. She's not present eh. Diba? She's not present kasi nga nasa Manila siya eh. So ang end result is she felt left out. And in the end, siguro nagsasabi siya, pwede bang ako maging part sa mga trainers doon siguro. And sabi nila, hindi ka na nasama kasi wala ka dito eh. Gusto ko sorry, natapos na yung signing eh. Ganyan siguro. So hindi na siya kasama. That's a scam. That is exploitation of our people. And the way she worded her her Facebook post is as if siya ang one and only representative ng pamilya ni Wangod. So but people forget na hindi pala siya ang main representative. The main representative of Wangod is her cousin, si Estelia Palangdaw. So yun ang nangyari. So it's basically galit and inggit and whatever na parang feeling left out. So hindi ako na-imbita sa party kaya itatrash ko yan. Parang ganun. The second one is Mabulo. So si Mabulo ay hindi man lang ako in-invite, hindi man lang ako pinasok dun sa programa ni Nas. I'm going to destroy him now that he is being pounded upon na ngayon na dinadown siya ng mga Pilipino. I'm going to add fuel to the fire. So gagawa ako ng kwento. So notice. Pati yung mga taong ayaw kay Nas, ayaw din kay Mabulo. Ayaw din nila kay Luis. Ang dami. If you look at the article about yung Luis Mabulo files charges in the CHR, the Commission on Human Rights against Nas. Ganyan. Puta, kung titingnan mo yung 99% ng mga comments galit sa kanya. Alam naman namin fake yung mo eh. Ang dami diyang comments. Ayoko kay Nas pero mas ayaw ko sa'yo. Parang ganyan. Maraming ganyan mga tao, ayaw kay Nas pero ayaw din nila kay Mabulo. Ayaw din nila kay Pulot.
Alam mo, Ryan, I can't help but observe, no? At biglang meron ako, may mga point of comparison ako sa mga nangyayari. Lalang-lalo sa involvement mo. There's this program kasi sa BBC radio. I forgot the host. And it's a segment called Unpopular Opinion. Tapos kinakanta niya yung unpopular opinion, tapos magsasalita yung caller. I don't like Taylor Swift. Ang feeling ko ikaw yung naging ganun na parang ikaw yung nagsasalita na unpopular because people are joining the bandwagon. You happen to have the opinion that is contradicting what they're saying. Contradicting what they're saying. But at the same time, there's merit to what you're saying because ang sinasabi mo lang is maging tayo, circumspect. You can't just jump into a conclusion about a certain...
Yeah.
Diba?
Kumbaga, let's do a thorough investigation first. I mean, kung may nagsabing, kunyari, ikaw Ron, sinabihan ka na magnanakaw ka, I mean, obviously ayaw mo na porket inakusa ka, maniniwala yung mga tao. They have to you prove muna kung totoo talagang wala namang ebidensya. I didn't do anything. Diba? So that's the same thing with Nas. Nas didn't do anything wrong actually. And if he did make a mistake, let's say a mistake na, sabihin natin, kulang ng papel, kulang ng signature ni ganito, sa NCIP, sabihin natin may nakulang silang dokumento, hindi sapat na rason yan para i-cyberbully siya. Ang point ko is, if it's an honest mistake, if it is parang mistake done in good faith, na pwedeng ayusin naman. Sabi nga ng NCIP, pwede namang aregluhin to eh. This is easy to fix. Kung aayusin lang nila yan, okay lang. Sabi ni Dr. Nestor Castro, it can be easily fixed. So, hindi commensurate yung galit ng maraming Pilipino dun kay Nas kung sabihin natin nagka-problema siya sa dokumento or sa so-called compliance with the NCIP. So, basically, ang akin is, don't jump to conclusions, don't overreact, be more logical, be more factual, because in the end, nagsasayang tayo ng oras kung galit tayo, tapos yung pala yung tao, wala naman palang masamang ginawa. Diba? Parang hinatulan mo yung isang taong inosente ng kamatayan. Yun yung nangyayari.
Naku. Sisibol yung conversation na yan. Yung mga opposition, they'll like that. Yung human rights, patay tayo dyan.
Human rights. Oh.
Alright.
It's just funny. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, anyway, it's already 11:19 p.m. here in the Philippines, in Metro Manila. Yes,
that's right. Same here. Oh, just one last lang.
Okay.
There was also one other blogger na dating kaibigan ni Nas, na si Lost Juan. And
sabi?
linaglag niya si Nas. Sabi niya, gumanon siya, parang sinabi niya, si Nas, dati kong kaibigan yan, pero nung sumikat yan, tingin ko ngayon, parang nag-iba siya, ganyan. So, the problem with that guy, nilalaglag niya si Nas. Why? Because takot siya na kung na-identify siya as a friend of Nas, na mawawalan siya ng followers. So, in an effort to save himself, he's trying to distance himself away from Nas by saying na hindi ko kaibigan yan. Which I think is a treacherous thing to do. I mean, kung hindi naman totoo yung mga sinasabi nila about Nas, bakit ka sasali sa bandwagon? 'Di ba? It's just lack of integrity, I mean, it's so ugly. It's so ugly on the part of Filipinos na ganyan na nangyayari. And this is not the first time it happened.
Sabi ni Jerome Dial, Lost Juan even included screenshots of their DM.
Yeah, he did that. Yeah, he did that. That's terrible, 'di ba? Parang talaga siya? Taksil talaga siya.
Here's a valid comment coming from one of our viewers here. Sabi niya, sabi ni Al Avorque, if there's needs to be castigating, it's Nas research and legal team. Na hindi daw I guess ang kanyang point is hindi nila ginawa yung kanilang due diligence, kumbaga.
To be honest, that is assuming na hindi nga nila ginawa. Kasi for all we know, baka nga naman pala talagang in reality, it might be that they are probably compliant. They're probably compliant. That's why Nas was so confident eh. They might be compliant. But the problem is, kaya nag-ano si Nas, Nas is also not, parang hindi niya masyadong ginagawa ng issue. Kasi, kaya hindi siya masyadong sumasawsaw ngayon is because sabi niya, we will, kaya nila tinake down yung course dun sa group, dun sa page nila, was because they said the family needs to sort things out internally. Why? Because it is an internal family feud. It is a feud of Huang Od and the rest of the family versus Gracia Palicas. So Gracia Palicas, para bang kumbaga that's your problem. Kayo ayusin niyo na lang 'yan kasi ayoko nang kumbaga ang mangyayari kasi dito ayaw ni Nas na yung parang sumausaw siya in a way that would cause the two factions in the family to fight each other. So parang inano na lang niya na kayo na lang muna mag-ayos niyan. But I think he's very confident that the truth will come out. That's why he's working with lawyers right now. Because in the end, let's sabihin natin 2 to 3 weeks from now, lalabas ang katotohanan. Uy, NCIP, meron pala silang lahat ng mga papeles, lahat ng ganito, lahat ng ganyan. I mean, it may very well turn out like that they did nothing wrong. Diba?
Grabe pala to, Orion. It spiraled for the worse for everyone.
It's ganito mangyayari. Lahat ng mga tarantadong bobong walang kwentang mga ugok na Pinoy na nagalit, mapapahiya sila. Mapapahiya talaga sila kasi pag lumabas yung katotohanan, let's say, sabihin natin, lalabas ang NCIP. We look through our records and everything in the record shows that fully compliant sila. And the only reason why we were so quiet was because we were trying to internally investigate how to best solve this, seeing that the problem right now is actually an internal family feud between members of the same family. So, and then we will just fix it later on after all that dies down. Okay, ayusin namin yan. Mangyayari dyan, this is the end of it eh. At some point in time, people will end up going to where the truth is. So, siguro nagsabog sila ngayon. Later on, eventually, people will realize, tama pala si Nas. Wala siyang ginawang masama. And then, ito na naman. Ako na naman yung tama. Oh, di ba? Mangyayari dyan na yung mga tatanga-tanga dyan na nagalit sa akin, pinagtatanggal mo yung isang banyaga, gago, putangin na nyo, kayong nagagalit sa akin. Unang-una, medyo kadugo ko si Nas dahil may dugong Arabo rin ako. Okay? Kaya ako nga siya medyo pinagtanggol ng konti kasi partly, yes, I feel for a fellow Levantine. Okay? May Lebanese blood ako siya, he's Palestinian. We're practically relatives. But more importantly is the principle and the process of doing due diligence, research, collecting the facts, doing the proper analysis. That's the most important thing. Para sa akin, mali talaga yung ginawa ng mga Pinoy na naghuramentado. It's like, nakakahiya sa buong mundo. You know, yung mangyayari dyan talaga, at the end of the day, maraming kumpanya, kahit sabihin natin, tanggalin natin yung 60-40, mag-RBH2 tayo, ganyan, hindi pa rin papasok ang mga kumpanya sa Pilipinas kung, wag na lang tayo, puro mga staksil yung mga taong yan. Right now, magiging kaibigan mo, pero maya-maya, magkaroon ng fake news against you, tataksilin ka nila. That's what they will think about Filipinos. Taksil tayo. That's what they will, this will explode, and then, you know, all these other nationalities all around the world, they will think Pinoys are chaotic and taksil, ganyan. Yan yung mangyayari.
I think the point
tinutulungan ka na nga ni Nas tapos gaganyanin mo, parang ganun yung mangyayari.
Dapat siguro ang maintindihan ng tao, kahit na ganun ka, syempre hindi mo maiwasan na may mga biases ka towards the personalities involved. And if you find it more convenient to hate somebody like Nas because sino ba tong tao na to, banyaga, tapos gumawa ng vlog, naging successful, kumita, tapos ngayon nasa Pilipinas, mas madaling paniwalaan na nag-take advantage siya sa ating kultura kaysa yung, di ba? So,
may narrative, may narrative kasi ang maraming Pilipino that we are perpetually losers.
Being exploited.
We're always being exploited. Parang ganon. Fragile egos tayo. And you know what will fix that? Kung nag-constitutional reform tayo tapos yumaman ng bansa natin, gumanda ang ekonomiya natin, mawawala yung ganyang klaseng natin, yung low self-esteem and fragile ego natin that turns us into huramentado.
And not only that, yung sinasabi mo kayo ng due diligence, importante yan. Gaya ng napag-usapan natin with with Professor Clare Carlos, na ang due diligence involves also yung konting effort on researching on like for example constitutional reform. Kung kailangan yung malaman, mas gusto nyo malaman kung what it's about, kung talagang makaka-improve sa ating bansa, mag-research tayo ng konti, bigyan natin ng konting effort. At isa pang bagay, bago tayo magpaalam, Orion, ipi-play ko muna yung video, ay meron tayong tinatawag na Game of Giants kasi kasama dito yung due diligence, ang pagre-research ating mga kandidato. To tell you more about the Game of Giants, please listen to this. Ayun, konting break lang muna.
Iihi muna ako.
Yung politiko, nagagampanan ba niya ang kanyang binoto mo ba siya dahil magaling siya? O dahil kilala ang kanyang pangalan? Gusto mo ba siya dahil todo ang kanyang serbisyo? O dahil todo bigay siya, manta at sumayaw sa entablado? Wala nang higit pa sa tamang kaalaman upang maiahon natin ang sarili sa kahirapan. Kapag sinuportahan mo ang tamang politiko, sigurado gaganda rin ang buhay mo. Dito papasok ang bagong online game na Game of Giants. Paraan ito na lumalim ang ating pagkakilala sa ating mga public servant. Pataasan ng score. The more ang accomplishment, mas mataas ang ranking. Paano laruin? I-download ang mga polycard ng paborito mong politiko. Nakasulat sa polycard ang kanilang social media scores. Dito malalaman lakas ang hatak nila. Pero mas importante ay dito mo rin matutulungan ang kandidato mo sa pag-share ng kanilang accomplishments sa pamamagitan ng social media posts. The more factual information ang pinapakalat mo, mas malaki ang chance na tataas sa Game of Giants leaderboard ang kandidato mo. Simulan mag-post ngayon at itag ang blueprint.ph #GameOfGiantsPH. The higher the engagement, the more chances to win. Get your polycards now by visiting blueprint.ph. Giant ba ang kandidato mo? Tara, laro tayo ng Game of Giants. Let's pick the right card, ha? The right people to serve us for a better Philippines. Alam mo, ang pinakamagandang phrase na pwede natin gamitin sa Game of Giants at saka sa ating pag-unawa ng Constitution ay pagtsagaan ang pag-unawa. Yun yung...
Yun.
Sorry, mali. Kailangan nating pagtsagaan ang pag-unawa sa bagay. At yun lang ang ating yun ang susi. Konting tsaga. Kasi kung gagawin natin yan, garantisado, no? Can you imagine, majority of our population or voting population will even have that mindset that's the first step to improving ourselves in the country that we live in. Pagtsaga sa pag-unawa, yun ang ating kailangan gawin. Pumunta blueprint.ph, i-download po natin yung mga polycards at simulan ninyong i-post yung mga inyong na research about sa inyong mga kandidato at yun ang i-post ninyo, i-share ninyo sa inyong mga kaibigan at sa publiko. At pag tumaas ang engagement ninyo, maraming magandang bagay na pwedeng mangyari sa inyo, including putting your favorite candidate on top of the leaderboard. That way, nagkakaroon ng entertainment factor yung process of researching about your candidates and getting the right people to run the show in Congress where we need which we need so that we can push for the reforms that we need, including constitutional reform na matagal lang tinutulak ni Orion, Perez, Dumdum ng Correct Movement. Yeah. So, ayos ha? Okay na ba tayo, Orion?
Ayos pre. Yun. And marami sa mga tao nagsasabi, bakit mo pinano si Nas? As I said, hindi ko tinatanggol si Nas. I'm promoting the process. Because this same process of thinking properly, gathering all the information, doing the research, and then doing the proper analysis, that's what will allow you to understand bakit kailangan natin yung constitutional reform. Doon mo
Tama.
ma-understand bakit bulok yung 1987 Constitution. Doon mo ma-understand, doon mo mauunawaan bakit nagkaganito ang Pilipinas? Ba't ang hirap-hirap natin? Bakit napaka-fragile ng mga ego ng mga Pilipino at ang dali-daling maghuramentado? Kasi kung tayo ay a successful nation, magiging self-confident tayo. Hindi tayo agad na nagagalit sa mga konting akala natin na may nag-aano sa atin. Hindi tayo magagalit na naguhuramentado. That's the truth.
Tsaka, if I may add din, Ryan, bago natin tapusin yung ating Istoryang Futbolero ngayong gabi, idagdag ko lang, kasama doon sa sinabi mo, ay doon rin natin makukuha yung ability na suriin yung mga tamang tao na kailangan natin para itulak yung sinasabi mong constitutional reform.
Yun, exactly. Yun.
So yun,
2 hours and 30 minutes na tayo.
Oo nga eh. Record. Pero sige lang.
Tayo.
Nag-enjoy tayo masyado. Nakasama natin si Professor Clare.
Yun, exactly.
Carlos. Grabe, no? Ayos na.
The best.
Level up na Istoryang Futbolero.
Level up tayo. Oo nga eh.
Ay, sabi nila, imbitahan daw natin si former Senator JPE, Juan Ponce Enrile.
Oo. Kunin natin.
Sige, subukan natin mga ewan ko lang kung kaya nyo ng alas 9 ng gabi. Agahan na lang natin siguro.
Agahan siguro natin. Oo.
Diba? Try natin. Nabisita ko na si JPE noon sa kanyang bahay at nakausap at interview.
Ayun naman pala, ikaw ang magano sa kanya. You go ahead and talk
pumayag.
to him. Baka pumayag, yes.
Oo.
Yes.
Sige, kulitin ko yung kakilala ko doon na close sa kanya. At baka pumayag mga
that's the best.
schedule natin ng alas 8 ng gabi.
Yun,
sa Istoryang Futbolero.
Yun.
Thank you guys.
Okay.
Maraming salamat. At mag-ingat po tayo. Hindi pa tapos ang pandemya. Ay mukhang ma-extend yata dito yung ang tawag ni PQ dito, Orion, sa Metro Manila hanggang August 20. So magtiis-tiis tayo ng konti at sundin natin po, mask, iwas, hugas, huwag magkalat ng fake news at huwag matakot magpabakuna. Kung magkaroon ng pagkakataon na pwedeng bakunahan, huwag tayong atibuli. At anong tawag dyan? Mag-hesitate. Para makakuha ng bakuna. Atubili. Tama. Yun. Good night, folks. Thank you for joining Istoryang Futbolero and Constitutional or Constipation Friday with Orion and Ron Poblete. Bye. Good night.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.